Chapter 107. By the time Zhang Xiaohua slowly finished his first lunch after returning to the manor, the people around him had already left. Zhang Xiaohua and He Tianshu had arrived late. Seeing that He Tianshu had hurriedly finished his meal, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to stand up, but was stopped by He Tianshu. He told her to eat slowly and not to rush. Anyway, he did not arrange any work for her in the afternoon. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua sat down obediently and ate this and that. She only left the dining hall when she felt full. The afternoon sun was very warm, especially when she was full. Zhang Xiaohua walked leisurely under the sun, her steps light. It was rare to have such a beautiful afternoon, and she should enjoy it. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was squinting when a female voice called out to her. "Zhang Xiaohua? Did you just finish eating?" She turned around and saw that Qiu Tong had seen her from the small courtyard in the distance. Zhang Xiaohua ran over happily and called out, "Sister Qiu Tong, why are you here?" Qiu Tong smiled and said, "The manor lord is in a bad mood today, so I went to the dining hall to take a look. What delicious food do you have here? Can I bring some back for the manor lord?" Zhang Xiaohua asked with concern. "What happened to Sister Manor Lord?" Qiu Tong said with a bitter expression. "You don't know about the matters of the manor. Don't ask too much." "Oh," Zhang Xiaohua changed the topic very honestly and said, "Sister Qiu Tong, I only returned to the manor this morning. Ma Jing and Lu Er went to the escort agency to fetch me." Qiu Tong smiled and said, "I know. I was the one who asked them to go. I was not free during this period. Today, Tian Zhongxi happened to say that someone was going to Pingyang City to purchase something, so I asked them to bring you back." Zhang Xiaohua looked at Qiu Tong gratefully and said, "Sister Qiu Tong, thank you. You are so good to me, just like my sister Lu Qian." "Lu Qian?" Qiu Tong was stunned and said, "Who is that?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Sister Lu Qian is my sister-in-law now. Before marrying my big brother, I called her big sister." Qiu Tong smiled and said, "Xiaohua, everyone likes you because you're a good child who knows how to endure hardships. It's not just me." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, "That's right. There's also Sister Manor Lord. When will I have to properly thank her?" Qiu Tong said, "Yes, there will be a chance. Just keep it in mind for now." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "I know, Sister Qiu Tong." Qiu Tong asked again, "How are your injuries now?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Okay, the doctor said that other than not being able to carry heavy things, everything else is fine." Qiu Tong nodded and said, "I'm sure you already know that I've assigned you to Captain He's place this time. He's already arranged a place for you to stay." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Yes, when I came back, brother she brought me to Captain He's place and then arranged a room for me. See, I just had a meal with them and was about to go back." Qiu Tong said, "That's good. You haven't fully recovered yet, so don't do anything too heavy. First, you can learn from Captain He. He has some problems that are difficult to solve, so you probably won't need to do anything." Zhang Xiaohua asked, "What problems? Is it serious?" Qiu Tong said, "You'll know when you go and take a look. Sai, this is also the Manor Lord's sore point. If you can solve it, you'll be doing the Manor Lord a great favor. It's much better than thanking her." "Pfft, look at what I'm thinking. Xiaohua, you don't have to take it to heart. I'm just saying. Even they can't do anything about it. What can a child like you do? Alright, I won't talk to you anymore. I'm in a hurry to go back. You should take care of yourself too. You've just recovered and your body is still weak. Don't get sick again. That'll only make things worse." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Alright, Qiu Tong Jiejia. I'll be careful. I'm leaving." With that said, the two waved goodbye and went their separate ways. Along the way, Zhang Xiaohua was still thinking, what kind of problem did Captain He and the Manor Lord encounter? Even the Manor Lord is so worried that he can't eat? But if they can't do anything, then I can't do anything either. I'll go take a look first. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua returned to his room. His bag was still in Ma Jing's room. They must have gone to work now. It wasn't appropriate for him to go get his things now. It was better to wait until they came back at night. Although Captain He had told him that he didn't have to work in the afternoon, and that he could rest in his room, how could he calm down? He was a teenager and didn't have the patience to sit down. Moreover, he had spent the past few months on the Kong bed. He rarely went out of Zhang Xiaohu's room. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he stay at home alone? After closing the door, Zhang Xiaohua followed the path that he had walked before to find He Tianshu and the others. He didn't know exactly where He Tianshu worked. However, he used to listen to Ma Jing's nagging, so he knew the general location. It wasn't too far away from the green-clothed men. Along the way, he saw many green-clothed men busy watering and weeding. Many people also saw Zhang Xiaohua. Some were even whispering to each other, and even pointing at him. Zhang Xiaohua thought of Ma Jing and naturally knew that they were jealous. He didn't care and just walked forward. He Tianshu's medicine field was separated from Tian Zhongshi's. There were some simple barriers in the middle to prevent the green-clothed men from going over. It was obvious from afar. In the past, Zhang Xiaohua only looked at it from afar, and didn't have the intention to go closer. Now as he walked over, he didn't feel nervous at all. After passing the barrier, he looked up. There wasn't much difference between this side and the other side. There were just a few medicine fields. However, the medicine fields here were not very neat. Some of the fields already had medicinal herbs growing, but some were bare, as if they had just been reclaimed. He Tianshu and the others were also busy. When Zhang Xiaohua came closer, they noticed. He Tianshu smiled and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, why didn't you rest in the house? Why did you come over?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Captain He, I can't stay idle. I'll follow you. If I understand it, it'll be easier for me to do it in the future." He Tianshu said, "The medicine fields here are not much different from the other side. It's just that the medicinal herbs are more important. Some medicinal herbs may need to be planted more carefully. I heard from Tian Zhongxi that you did a good job there. You grew up in the field since you were young, so it shouldn't be a problem. Later, follow Nie Xiao Air and watch carefully. He'll tell you the special places to pay attention to." But Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "But what?" He Tianshu said, "But I hope your memory won't be as bad as when you practice boxing. Make Nie Xiao Air repeat it 180 times. Zhang Xiaohua blushed and said, "No, Captain He, my memory is quite good. Even young Master Li praised me before. But I'm just bad at boxing, he. He Tianshu asked, "Which young Master Li?" Zhang Xiaohua explained, "It's Li Jinfeng, young Master Li. He's studying at the academy. He's the teacher who taught me how to read." He Tianshu's eyes lit up and said, "The teacher who taught you with Shuawen Jiezi? He's really interesting. If there's a chance, I'd like to meet him." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Captain He also knows that he's interesting. When I see him next time, I'll tell him to come and see you." He Tianshu waved his hand and said, "Don't say that he wants to see me. If there's a chance, let's all meet up together." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Okay, young Master Li is also a very easygoing person. He won't have any objections." After that, Nie Xiao Air brought Zhang Xiaohua to work while explaining to him. The medicine field here was indeed more complicated than the other side. Every medicine had to be watered at different times and amounts. There were also many things to take note of and the specific details of the operation that needed to be carefully memorized. Luckily, Zhang Xiaohua's brain was better than when he was practicing boxing. Otherwise, He Tianshu would really be worried. There weren't many medicine fields under the care of the medicine hall, only a few pieces. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be He Tianshu and the others who came. However, in these few fields, there was still a small portion of the land that wasn't planted with medicine. But just as Zhang Xiaohua was learning the details from Nie Xiao Air, Zhang Xiaohua actually saw He Tianshu bringing someone with him to water those empty fields. He even carefully squatted there and occasionally picked up the soil to look at it, frowning as he thought about something. Zhang Xiaohua was very curious and asked Nie Xiao Air, "Big brother Xiao Air, what do you think Captain He is doing? Why is he watering the empty fields and spacing out?" Nie Xiao Air glared at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I'm warning you. Don't call me Big Brother Xiao Air in the future. Why does it feel like you're calling a waiter? No matter what, your big brother Nie is still a disciple of the Misty School. He has some status in the pugilistic world. Why does it sound like this in your mouth?" This is the last time. Call me Big Brother Xiao Nie in the future. Zhang Xiahua nodded and said, I know. Hurry and tell me what's going on with Captain He, Big Brother Xiao Air. Nie Xiao Air's nose was crooked from anger. He gave a humph and ignored him. Zhang Xiahua hurriedly apologized and said, all right. Big Brother Xiao Nie, I was wrong, okay? Please be magnanimous and don't be angry, okay? Seeing that Nie Xiao Air still didn't speak, Zhang Xiahua rolled her eyes and said, if you continue to be angry when my injuries heal, I'll find Captain He and have him assign you to teach me fist techniques. When Nie Xiao Air heard this, he immediately surrendered and said with a smile, Big Brother Xiahua, you're going off topic. If you want to learn fist techniques, just tell your big brother Nie. We don't need to trouble Captain He. You see, isn't he worrying about something right now? Let him worry about the farm. Actually, speaking of this matter, we have to start from planting medicinal herbs. You might have heard from Ma Jing and the others about how we opened up this medicinal field. It's specifically for the medicine hall's use. The herbs planted here aren't normal herbs, but some of the herbs that our Misty School obtained from other places, and have already been lost in the pugilistic world. Otherwise, why wouldn't they let Ma Jing and the others plant it, and instead have us come here from Misty Mountain Villa? Zhang Xiahua nodded and said, this, I do know a little about it. But what does it have to do with this empty space? Nie Xiao Air smiled mysteriously and said, Big Brother Xiahua, open your wise eyes and take a look. Or use your strict thinking to think about it. If it was an empty space, would Captain He have gone crazy and poured water there? Zhang Xiahua was stunned and said, could it be that it's not an empty space? Nie Xiao Air said matter-of-factly and said, of course it is. There are seeds planted there. Zhang Xiahua was even more confused and said, then why haven't they sprouted? Haven't the other medicinal fields sprouted long ago? Some of them have already grown very tall. Nie Xiao Air spread out his hands and said, yes, why haven't they sprouted? This is the reason why Captain He is so worried. If I knew, I would become a captain. Or I wouldn't be a burden to Captain He. In an instant, Zhang Xiahua understood and also understood what Qiu Tong meant when she saw her in the morning. The seeds of these herbs had been planted for more than half a year, but they still hadn't sprouted. Presumably, they didn't know the reason, so they couldn't cultivate more herbs. There was no way for a lost herb to reappear in the Misty School. No wonder He Tianshu was worried. Big Sister Village head didn't eat. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiahua was just a normal child. He only knew how to cultivate crops. Now he even knew how to cultivate normal herbs. He didn't think that he would be able to solve these problems. Looking at the pitiful He Tianshu, Zhang Xiahua still focused on her studies. She slowly familiarized herself with Nie Xiao Air and tried to get into the role as soon as possible. The afternoon passed as Zhang Xiahua studied diligently. At night, Zhang Xiahua took her little bag out of Ma Jing's room. Ignoring Ma Jing's persistent attempts to pull her hand and his resentful gaze, she ran back to her room like a wisp of smoke. She had finally escaped Ma Jing's demonic feet. How could she want to stay a moment longer? When she thought about how Lu Er didn't seem to feel any discomfort while staying there, Zhang Xiahua's admiration for Lu Er immediately surged like a torrential river. Nighttime was still the time for He Tianshu and the others to practice. Zhang Xiahua went to the training room as usual. Not long after, He Tianshu and the others arrived. He Tianshu said, Zhang Xiahua, don't practice boxing yet. Try to get into the horse stance. See if your right arm can withstand it. Zhang Xiahua tried and said, Captain He, my arm is fine. However, the bandage on my right hand is still there. I can't make a fist. He Tianshu said, then don't make a fist. Try the horse stance. You haven't done it for a few months, right? Zhang Xiahua blushed and said, that's right. In the beginning, I stayed on the Kong bed all day long and didn't dare to move. Later on, when I got better and could move, I hurt my bones again. I just walked around the room. I've long forgotten about the horse stance. He Tianshu smiled and said, that's right. You didn't practice the horse stance at all. How could you care about it? It's not your fault that you don't know how to cherish things that you get easily. I'm guessing that you've already returned those moves to me. Zhang Xiahua argued. No, Captain He. I still remember those moves. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. After saying that, she was about to get into the stance and start practicing. He Tianshu hurriedly stopped her and said, "Don't blindly show off. If you can't even make a fist, how are you going to practice? Wait a few days. However, it's fine if you've forgotten those moves. It might be better to practice them again." After saying that, he laughed and went to practice. Zhang Xiaohua had nothing to say. She could only get into the horse stance and watch the others practice. Seeing Nie Xiao, and the others practice set after set of fist techniques, palm techniques, sword techniques, etc., Zhang Xiaohua was very envious. When would she have such a day? He Tianshu, on the other hand, was practicing under a tree. His movements were very slow, but Zhang Xiaohua could clearly feel the power of each move. Each move could bring about a kind of power. It was not like when he was practicing his own boxing. It was just a move. Only the offensive moves had pure power. He could not help but be moved in his heart. Was this the internal energy that Zhang Xiaohu was talking about? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua concentrated on watching He Tianshu practice, hoping to discover something from it. Unfortunately, when He Tianshu finished practicing a set of fist techniques, he could only feel that the other person's fist techniques were vigorous and vigorous. He couldn't see anything else. Even the moves were vague. Could it be that the Zhang Xiaohua who forgot the moves was back again? Or was the feng shui of Huanqi Mountain Villa not as good as the Lotus Escort Agency? After He Tianshu finished practicing the fist techniques, he walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's motionless body, he said with satisfaction, "Zhang Xiaohua, your horse stance is really good. Other than your right arm, the other parts are the same as what I taught you before. Your horse stance level is really not ordinary. When our Misty School has a horse stance competition, I will definitely recommend you to go. You will definitely get first place." Zhang Xiaohua said happily, "Really, Captain He, if there is such an opportunity, you must call me. When will it be?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "Okay, no problem. When the time comes, I will definitely call you." "Okay, you should take it too. Rest early. Tomorrow you should follow Nie Xiao. You don't want to stay in the house alone anyway." Zhang Xiaohua jumped up and said, "Okay, I know." But in her heart, she was still thinking, when would the time come? Following behind He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but ask, "Captain He, when you were practicing just now, did you use internal energy?" He Tianshu stopped in his tracks and turned around to ask, "How did you know?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "I saw that your fist techniques were different from mine. It seemed like there was power hidden in the moves. My recruitment was purely based on the moves." He Tianshu was silent and said, "Your eyesight or intuition is really good. It's like this." Zhang Xiaohua probed, "Captain He, this internal energy cultivation method, can you teach me?" He Tianshu smiled and raised his hand. "Internal energy cultivation method? You learned it from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Yes, I heard it from my second brother. He is an escort at the escort agency, and is now learning internal energy at the martial arts school." He Tianshu was stunned and asked, "Your second brother is an escort, but he is learning internal energy at the martial arts school?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Yes, it's like this." He Tianshu said, "It seems that your second brother is not like you. He should be an expert in martial arts." Most martial arts schools only teach internal energy cultivation methods to the elites. Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, "Yes, my second brother is a genius. That's why he can learn internal energy at the martial arts school." Then she asked expectantly, "Do you think I can learn it?" Chapter 108. He Tianshu sighed and said, "Xiaohua, it's not that I don't want to teach you, but first, the inner strength method that I learned is only for the disciples of the Misty School. It cannot be taught to anyone who isn't a disciple of the school. If it is discovered that it was taught privately, not only will I be punished by the discipline hall, you will also be crippled of your martial arts. Second, this inner strength method is not like fist techniques. It requires talent. If your talent is not good, then you will not have any progress after practicing for several years. Did your second brother also tell you this?" He can't teach you inner strength. Zhang Xiaohua nodded disappointedly and said, Yes, second brother also said this. He Tianshu rubbed Zhang Xiaohua's head and said, Go back. Everyone has their own fate. The heavens have already arranged it. If you have this fate, then perhaps in the near future, you will be able to get what you want. Otherwise, even if you try your best, you will gain nothing. Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head and disappointedly followed He Tianshu back. Under the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua carefully read a book. This was not a fist technique, but some books that Li Jinfeng had left for him. During the period of recovery, he had developed a habit of reading some books at night. No matter if it was a fist technique or a book, if he didn't read it, it would seem that something was missing. He had read all the fist technique manuals that could be read, and only the books were left. There were countless books, enough for Zhang Xiaohua to read for a lifetime. Suddenly, he saw the words reviewing the old to learn the new, and learning while practicing in the book. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be moved. He carefully put down the book and closed his eyes to think about the fist technique manuals that he had memorized. There was no special reason why he didn't tell He Tianshu this today. It was like a child who had gotten his favorite toy and would not immediately tell the adults. The child would take it out to show off at an unexpected moment to surprise the adults. He would then look at the adults' stunned expressions and laugh loudly. That was all. Zhang Xiaohua also had the same thought, but most importantly, he still did not have confidence in himself. He was afraid that he would not be able to master these fist techniques. Rather than saying it now, it would not be too late to say it when he really mastered them. Fortunately, with Zhang Xiaohua's thoughts, that fist technique was like a river, and she could still clearly recall it. However, Zhang Xiaohua's expression did not change. She raised her right hand and looked at the bandage. She touched it with her left hand for a moment, but still did not take it off. Late at night, Zhang Xiaohua blew out the light and fell asleep peacefully. In the next few days, Zhang Xiaohua followed Nie Xiao'er to familiarize herself with the planting of various medicinal herbs during the day, and practiced the horse stance at night. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that Elder Yu, whom he hadn't seen for several months, would come to visit them every night. That night, Zhang Xiaohua was still reading under the oil lamp when she heard someone knocking on the door. Zhang Xiaohua was startled. This was the first time someone had knocked on the door at night. Thus, she put down her book and opened the door. Using the light in the room, it was actually the one-armed Elder Yu. Zhang Xiaohua was very surprised. Elder Yu, how are you? Please come in. After Zhang Xiaohua invited Elder Yu into the room and invited him to sit on the chair, she said, Elder Yu, I've been back for many days, but I haven't seen you. Are you very busy? Elder Yu smiled. Not to mention that you've only been back for a few days. How many times have you seen me during the month you stayed in the villa? Zhang Xiaohua said, It's because I haven't seen you for several months, so I'm a little surprised. Why are you here today? Elder Yu said, It's nothing much. I just heard that you're back, so I came to take a look at your injuries. Zhang Xiaohua was a little flattered. Thank you for your concern, Elder Yu. I should be fine now. I'll get Captain He to take a look tomorrow and remove the bandage. Elder Yu waved his hand. There's no need to wait until tomorrow. I'll help you remove it now. The recovery of a bone injury isn't something that can be determined in a day or two. Zhang Xiaohua was more curious about Elder Yu's attitude. From the first time they met, he was neither cold nor indifferent to her. Why was he so concerned about her today? It was thought-provoking. However, Elder Yu was an old man after all, and he was concerned about her. Zhang Xiaohua also respected her elders, so Zhang Xiaohua allowed Elder Yu to remove the bandage on her hand. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua's injuries were already healed. The bandage was just a form of psychological sustenance. Just as Elder Yu said, there was no difference whether he removed it today or tomorrow. Thus, even though Elder Yu only had one right hand, he was still able to remove the bandage easily with Zhang Xiaohua's help. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand didn't look any different from before. It was just that her skin was abnormally pale, probably due to the lack of light. Elder Yu didn't immediately examine Zhang Xiaohua's fingers. Instead, he said, Try clenching your fist first. Zhang Xiaohua obeyed and tried to retract her fingers. This was a very normal action in the past, But now it was abnormally clumsy. Even her fingers didn't seem to listen to her. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua's fingers were retracted to a certain extent. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move them further. In other words, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't even clench her fist. Zhang Xiaohua panicked. Elder Yu, what's going on? My hand. Why is my hand like this? Elder Yu said amiably. Don't be anxious. It's always like this after an injury. In the future, you have to practice retracting your fingers frequently. It'll take time for you to recover. Now let me take a look at the details of your bones. Then, Elder Yu used his thumb and index finger to pinch Zhang Xiaohua's fingers. He examined them inch by inch. After a long while, he finally finished examining. Elder Yu raised his head. Under the light of the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see his expression. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask, but when she looked at her hand, she didn't see anything wrong with it, so she didn't ask. Elder Yu also didn't tell Zhang Xiaohua about the recovery of her bones. Instead, he asked her, "Why do you want to learn martial arts?" Zhang Xiaohua was baffled. She didn't understand and replied, "Of course it's to protect my family." Other than protecting your family, what else will you do if you learn martial arts? Elder Yu asked. Zhang Xiaohua furrowed her brows and answered honestly, "No, I haven't thought that much. Right now, I just want to practice my fist techniques." This time, it was Elder Yu's turn to furrow his brows. He asked again, "Then after you learn martial arts, will you help the weak and help the strong? Will you help the weak?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's mind immediately flashed with the scene of her and her father being bullied in Lu Town, and the scene of her and her elder brother being trampled on the ground by the strong people of Xichui Mountain. She couldn't help but feel her blood boil. She spat out, "Of course I will. If I learn martial arts and have the ability to help others and help the weak, of course I will do it." Elder Yu asked again, "Then are you sure that the weak are wronged and should be helped?" Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. "Elder Yu, this I don't understand. If the weak don't have a reason, why would they provoke the strong?" Elder Yu smiled and said, "This question is a bit difficult. You're still young and don't understand people's hearts. Perhaps you'll understand in the future." Then he asked again, "Then if you want to help the weak and help the strong, but the strong person's martial arts are stronger than yours, will you help?" This sentence made Zhang Xiaohua not know how to answer. This time in Lu Town, of course, it was Zhang Xiaolong who stepped forward bravely. He wasn't afraid of the strong, but the result was also disastrous. She remembered it clearly. Mr. Lu and Lu Kai also reminded her to act according to her ability. This question was really hard to answer. However, in an instant, a thought flashed through her mind. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Isn't this the reason why I have to continuously practice fist techniques and even internal strength?" Elder Yu furrowed his brows and then relaxed. He didn't ask Zhang Xiaohua any more questions. Instead, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, although the bones in your right hand have healed, it was still damaged by internal strength. It's no longer the same as before. It's like a broken vase. No matter how much it's repaired, it can still be used. However, the cracks in the vase still exist. This can't be repaired easily. If you're not careful, it can still be broken. This will be a huge hindrance to your martial arts. You must be mentally prepared." Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand the seriousness of the problem. She smiled and said, "This situation, the escort agency's doctor has already told me. I'll slowly recover. Bones can grow back. After all, it's different from a vase. As long as I can practice fist techniques and internal strength, it's fine. I'm not thinking of saving the entire martial arts world." Elder Yu sighed and didn't say anything else. He only nodded his head and told Zhang Xiaohua to rest early. He then turned around and left. Zhang Xiaohua sent him to the door. Looking at Elder Yu's back in the night, she was very puzzled. This old man had stayed in her room for so long and asked so many questions. What exactly did he want? Zhang Xiaohua didn't think that it was as simple as removing the bandages and checking on her injuries. However, what exactly was the reason? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't figure it out even after thinking for a long time. However, time was the answer to all questions. When the time came, she would naturally know. Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep as she thought about it. She didn't even blow out the oil lamp. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua went to the place where He Tianshu and the others were practicing martial arts as usual. As he walked, he stretched and stretched his fingers, continuously practicing. As usual, Zhang Xiaohua was the first to arrive. He didn't get into the horse stance. Instead, he clenched his fists and tried out a few fist techniques. He realized that even if he didn't clench his fists, he could still execute a complete move without any discomfort. It was just that when his right hand changed between fist and palm, it was a little sluggish and his fingers were a little stiff. Presumably, through his continuous practice, it would gradually improve in the future. Thinking about how he didn't dare to practice martial arts for fear of affecting the recovery of his fingers, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but find it funny. If he had known earlier, he would have started practicing martial arts a long time ago. He wouldn't have to watch He Tianshu and the others practice martial arts every day while he himself was in the horse stance. However, he had forgotten that he couldn't clench his fists before removing the bandages. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was happily practicing, He Tianshu and the others came over. He Tianshu smiled and greeted Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua, why are you up so early? Are you impatient to remove the bandages? Zhang Xiaohua grinned as he stretched out his right hand and clenched his fist. He boasted, Captain He, look, I've already removed the bandages. It's just that my fingers still can't bend completely. I still need to train more. He Tianshu scolded with a smile. Child, you're really impatient. Didn't we agree to remove it today? Why did you remove it by yourself? Zhang Xiaohua replied seriously. Captain He, you're wrongly accusing me. I listened to you and was prepared to let you remove it today. However, Elder Yu came to my room last night and removed it for me. He Tianshu asked curiously, what's going on? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua told He Tianshu everything that happened last night. He Tianshu was also confused, but when he heard Elder Yu's questions for Zhang Xiaohua, he furrowed his brows. Elder Yu was clearly admiring Zhang Xiaohua's character. Could it be that Elder Yu wanted to take in a disciple? However, He Tianshu wasn't too clear about Elder Yu's background. He had only vaguely heard about him from others. He could be considered a figure in the pugilistic world. If he was interested in Zhang Xiaohua, then it was Zhang Xiaohua's fortune. But what about Zhang Xiaohua's hands? He Tianshu couldn't help but feel suspicious. Then he felt relieved. This was someone else's business. He couldn't accept Zhang Xiaohua no matter what, so why should he worry about it? Then he thought of the few questions Zhang Xiaohua had answered and thought to himself, this Zhang Xiaohua is really an honest child. If he was a little smarter, he would have climbed up the pole long ago. Even if he didn't fill the sky with lotuses, he would definitely not give up. At the very least, he would have made a statement for justice, for peace, and for the happiness of the people of Jianghu. Sai, who knew that this Zhang Xiaohua only cared about protecting his family and practicing his fist techniques. He actually didn't understand the hidden meaning in Elder Yu's words. If he did, he would have knelt on the ground and begged Elder Yu to accept him. What a pity. But if that was the case, would she still be Zhang Xiaohua? He Tianshu shook his head. This Zhang Xiaohua wasn't the down-to-earth Zhang Xiaohua that everyone liked. The pugilistic world still needed people who could do things. When Zhang Xiaohua saw He Tianshu shaking his head and knitting his brows, he couldn't help asking, Captain He, Elder Yu is doing this for my own good. He wants to take a look at my injuries, so please don't be angry. He Tianshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He glared at her and said, Am I that petty? Are you angry that someone took off your bandage first? Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and didn't dare to speak. Then she said, Captain He, since you're not angry, then I've removed the bandage. I want to practice my fist technique. Can you give me some pointers? When He Tianshu heard this, he immediately took half a step back and prepared to use his qigong. He said, How about this? You first do some recovery exercises and revise your previous fist techniques. As for the new fist techniques, I'll ask Nia Xiao to teach you, okay? After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua's reply and ran away with his qigong. Zhang Xiaohua was left behind and asked curiously, Why did you run away so fast? Captain He, I didn't plan on asking you to teach me. I've already memorized a lot of fist techniques. I just wanted you to watch from the side. Why did you run away?" Then, just as she was about to look for Nie Xiao, and the others, she found that they were nowhere to be seen. Zhang Xiaohua felt a burst of admiration. It was so good to have Qinggong. Since there was no one to guide her, Zhang Xiaohua didn't mind. She had so many fist techniques in her mind, and every set was deeply engraved in her memory. If she wanted to perform them all, it wasn't impossible. She didn't need anyone to teach her. Thinking about this, the corners of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth slowly curled up. She thought to herself, "Wait until I've practiced all the fist techniques. See if I don't get a dustpan to collect your dropped jaws." Thus, Zhang Xiaohua took up a stance and began her first practice after recovering from her injury. Zhang Xiaohua had a lot of fist techniques in her mind. She didn't deliberately choose one and just randomly picked one. She narrowed her eyes and searched her memory. Then she started practicing with the figure in her mind. After the first practice, it could be said to be perfect. It was almost exactly the same as Zhang Xiaohua's memory. Zhang Xiaohua was extremely happy. Could it be that she really wasn't trash? Was there a problem with Captain He's teaching method? Could it be that only by looking at the fist techniques and memorizing them in her mind, could she truly learn the complete fist techniques? A series of questions prompted Zhang Xiaohua to immediately practice a second time. The result was very satisfactory. He didn't miss any moves. Unfortunately, it was already late. There wasn't much time for Zhang Xiaohua to verify it a third time. He hurried to the dining room. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't, or maybe he didn't even notice that the figure in his mind had faded a lot. It wasn't as clear as before. Now Zhang Xiaohua had already gotten into character. He followed Nie Xiao to do some basic chores. He was already very used to using his left hand. His left hand could complete everything very flexibly. However, when he wasn't very busy or felt that he had time, Zhang Xiaohua insisted on using his right hand, even though it was a little clumsy. Today he deliberately used his right hand, such as holding a small shovel, small scissors, and so on. This was because he knew that only by training his right hand as soon as possible could he truly learn the fist techniques as soon as possible. This was because he could already perform a complete set of fist techniques today. Just thinking about it made his heart burn. After dinner, Zhang Xiaohua went to the practice area early. However, he didn't stay in the same place. Instead, he walked outside for a while, far away from He Tianshu and the others. However, he didn't have to worry that He Tianshu couldn't find him. Although it was far away, there were lanterns hanging on the trees. Just as Zhang Xiaohua thought. As soon as He Tianshu and the others went out, they saw Zhang Xiaohua's lantern from afar. They thought that he was shy and didn't want to show his incomplete moves. He Tianshu even praised Zhang Xiaohua in his heart. Now that his injury was healed, he knew how to be shy. In the past, he was very thick-skinned when practicing fist techniques. He forgot one move after another without blushing. Zhang Xiaohua stood under the tree and calmed his emotions. He slowly practiced the set of fist techniques again in the morning. He could actually finish it without missing a move. He was naturally very happy. He could finally confirm that he could finish a set of fist techniques. How could he not be happy? Just as he was about to run over to He Tianshu to report the good news, he remembered that He Tianshu was also practicing. He could wait until tomorrow. Thus, he began to think about whether he could practice the second set of fist techniques. He practiced as he wished. The moves of the fist techniques were all in his mind. Zhang Xiaohua didn't stop practicing the second set. Sure enough, the effect was as obvious as the first set. He could still perform it completely. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua was very excited. He practiced the two sets of fist techniques from beginning to end, over and over again. Please collect it. Thank you. Chapter 109. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that as he practiced over and over again, his moves were slowly changing, gradually breaking away from the original records in the manual. Moreover, the figure in his mind was slowly blurring, as if he was forgetting the deeply engraved moves in the manual. Zhang Xiaohua, who finished practicing, felt very comfortable. He read a book under the oil lamp for a while, then went to bed early. Even in his dreams, there was a smile on his face. When he woke up in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua excitedly ran to the training grounds, full of joy. He waited there as if he was presenting a treasure, wanting to give He Tianshu and Nie Xiao a surprise. He Tianshu and the others saw Zhang Xiaohua standing there early in the morning, but they didn't find it strange. This guy woke up so early every day. Who knows where the sleepiness of a youth went? Everyone greeted him normally and then went back to practicing. Only He Tianshu smiled and asked, Zhang Xiaohua, why did you run so far last night? Were you practicing some peerless martial arts? You're even hiding it and not letting us see? However, any peerless martial arts requires a good body to practice. You have to first take care of your body. You have to know that the body is the capital to roam the Jianghu. After He Tianshu finished teasing, he prepared to leave. Zhang Xiaohua mysteriously said, Captain He, I really did practice some peerless martial arts yesterday. Do you want to see? He Tianshu stopped in his tracks and raised his eyebrows, secretly thinking, not bad, you actually know how to counter lust. This child can be taught. However, if you want to spar with me, you're still too inexperienced. Thus he went with the flow and crossed his arms in front of his chest, shouting loudly, little ones, come over. Zhang Xiaohua wants to show us some peerless martial arts. Nie Xiao and the others heard the captain's call, and immediately used their movement skills to gather. Everyone looked at Zhang Xiaohua, their eyes full of smiles. The four of them knew Zhang Xiaohua's aptitude. Who would expect Zhang Xiaohua to practice some peerless martial arts? They just didn't see each other last night. What kind of fortuitous encounter could there be? Their actions today were just adding to the jokes in their lives, treating Zhang Xiaohua as their own cute little brother. Zhang Xiaohua saw that everyone's eyes were fixed on him. He was originally full of confidence, but now he was a little nervous. He muttered, it's not some peerless martial arts. It's just that I practiced 2 sets of fist techniques yesterday, and can perform them completely. Everyone was surprised. Is that so? Really? It must be a peerless martial art. Our little blossom wouldn't be able to remember ordinary fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua ignored their teasing. He calmed himself down, got into a horse stance, and prepared to start practicing the fist technique he had practiced the day before. However, when he raised his arm, he didn't know where to hit. He had actually forgotten. His mind went blank. What was going on? Zhang's his, how he's yesterday, he was very familiar with it. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua raise his arm to hit but stop, everyone's heart was like a mirror. They smiled and said, Zhang Xiaohua, hurry up. We can't wait to see it. After Zhang Xiaohua's panic, he was slightly disappointed. He could only say, I forgot this set. Watch my next set. He thought to himself, sigh, it's not the first time I've been mocked by you guys. I'll get used to it. However, the gods passing by must bless me. Please don't let me forget the next set of fist techniques. Even if I can remember 1 or 2 moves, it's fine. Sure enough, perhaps Zhang Xiaohua's prayer was effective. A god flew over Zhang Xiaohua's head. In short, Zhang Xiaohua really performed 2 sets of fist techniques in front of He Tianshu and the others. However, these 2 sets of fist techniques were not connected to each other. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's 2 sets of fist techniques and thought for a long time. He asked, Zhang Xiaohua, these 2 sets of fist techniques seem to be from the South Branch fist? However, the way you're fighting seems to be different from what I know. Zhang Xiaohua clasped his hands and stood there pitifully. He didn't know what to say or do. He really wanted to prove that he wasn't a good-for-nothing. He really wanted to show He Tianshu all the fist techniques he knew according to the fist technique manual in his mind. However, he was afraid that all the fist techniques would be yesterday's reenactment, and he would forget them the next day. In that case, he might as well not let them know that he had memorized a lot of fist techniques. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, He Tianshu's heart ached. He walked up to him and patted his head, saying, Zhang Xiaohua, I know you're in the escort agency. Although you're recuperating, I'm sure you still want to practice your fist techniques. You must have learned these 2 sets of fist techniques from the escort agency, and now you want to show them to us. I didn't see all of your moves today, but I believe you must have worked hard and learned them before. So, Zhang Xiaohua, you have to pull yourself together. If others can learn it after practicing it once, you can practice it 10 times, 100 times. You can do it. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with tears. When he heard He Tianshu's words, he couldn't help but feel shocked. He wiped his tears with his left sleeve and asked unconfidently, Captain He, can I really do it? He Tianshu nodded and said firmly, yes. However, he prayed in his heart, Gods and Buddhas all over the sky, please forgive my lies. I'm doing this for Zhang Xiaohua's sake. Only you guys will know if it's true or not, right? Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be really encouraged. The dispirited look on his face was swept away. He smiled and said, all right, I'll definitely work hard and not let you down, Captain He. He Tianshu smiled and said, I believe that. You definitely won't. However, in his heart he thought, I don't have any expectations at all. You won't let me down at all. The 3 people beside him also said, Xiaohua, you must work hard. We all have high hopes for you. After breakfast, He Tianshu was going to lead the 4 people to work in the medicine field. However, Zhang Xiaohua asked He Tianshu for leave and wanted to rest for a day. He Tianshu naturally agreed without hesitation. Zhang Xiaohua's injuries had just healed and he was still resting. A few days ago, Zhang Xiaohua had insisted on working. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's somewhat injured right hand and felt very uncomfortable. Today, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to take a day off. He even said that he wanted Zhang Xiaohua to rest for a few more days. Zhang Xiaohua stayed in the room alone and thought carefully. The memories of the 2 sets of fist techniques from yesterday no longer existed in his mind. However, there were 2 more moves that were similar to the Arhut fist. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to understand that the fist techniques he learned from He Tianshu were no different from the fist techniques he learned from the manual. It wasn't that he suddenly became enlightened. He would still forget the moves. The moves that were left in his mind were only memories. He hadn't mastered them yet. When he started practicing, those complete fist techniques would be the same as when he learned from He Tianshu. He would forget the moves one by one. He really wasn't made for martial arts. However, Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood that everyone's path of martial arts was not the same. He had already thought about it when he was recuperating. It was just that he was blinded by his clear memory of the fist techniques, and thought that he could learn the complete fist techniques. Now that he had returned to the starting point, it wasn't considered a failure. He should just obediently combine his own fist techniques, and wait until he could link up a complete set of fist techniques. However, it was also good that he could clearly remember the fist techniques. It was equivalent to finding himself a master. He didn't need to look for others to learn fist techniques. It provided him with good materials to combine his fist techniques. There were more than 100 sets of fist techniques in his mind. He didn't know if he could complete a complete set of fist techniques after he finished practicing them. Sighing, Zhang Xiaohua didn't think about it anymore. He pushed open the door and went out. He still went to the place where he practiced last night. He gathered his thoughts and started yesterday again according to his memory. In fact, the most important thing in doing anything was to find the goal, and not the twists and turns in the process. From Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts practice process, it deeply illustrated this point. What Zhang Xiaohua didn't lack was that kind of hard work, and that kind of tenacity unique to country people. What he didn't have was that kind of vision from a high vantage point. There was also no one to guide him and give him pointers. There was also no one to tailor his clothes and assign a one-on-one training plan for him. Even if He Tianshu liked this young man very much and could teach him martial arts fist techniques, there were times when he wouldn't specifically work hard for him. After all, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't his disciple and wasn't his blood relative. He Tianshu could teach Zhang Xiaohua so much and enlighten him on his fist techniques. It was already quite good. Otherwise, this country youth could only wave a small medicine spatula and dream about his martial arts. Nie Xiao was the same. Now that Zhang Xiaohua had found the path that suited him, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. Naturally, he was unstoppable. He practiced a certain fist technique in his memory over and over again, experiencing the changes in his memory. But what surprised him was that no matter how he practiced, the memory in his mind remained the same. It didn't become blurry, because of the familiarity of the moves. This was really strange. So he started practicing the second set of fist techniques. This time he didn't practice too much. He only practiced it twice to familiarize himself with the fist technique, before practicing the third set. This third set, he practiced it about 10 times and confirmed that he was very familiar with it. On this day of holiday, Zhang Xiaohua was practicing his fist techniques from morning to night. He practiced about 10 sets of fist techniques. Except for the morning practice, when he paid more attention to the fist techniques in his memory, Zhang Xiaohua didn't deliberately observe the other fist techniques. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the foot of the tree with uneasiness and anticipation. He took up his stance. Sure enough, as Zhang Xiaohua expected, the fist techniques that he had familiarized himself with the day before had all disappeared from his memory. What was left behind were the fragmented moves that he had memorized deeply. It was difficult to forget them even if he wanted to. As for whether these moves were the same as the ones in the manual, it was easy to figure out the answer. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't disappointed because of the past. Instead, he was faintly excited. It seemed that he had found an unusual path. Whether this path was correct or not was still unknown. He needed to continue working hard and slowly explore. However, as the saying goes, everyone has a time when they cross the river by feeling the stones. Wasn't making a mistake just like paying tuition? Zhang Xiaohua was still young. If he made a mistake, even the heavens would forgive him. Since it was a set of fist techniques, no matter if he practiced it 3 times, 10 times, or even dozens of times, he would eventually forget it. The moves would have to be changed. Zhang Xiaohua naturally wasn't stupid enough to practice each fist technique dozens of times. He successfully practiced 3 sets of fist techniques in one morning. During the day, Zhang Xiaohua didn't officially start working in the herbal field. Therefore, he just followed behind Nie Xiao Air. In his free time, he was still recuperating in the escort agency. He slowly combined the remaining moves in his mind. However, perhaps it was because he didn't have many moves now. He could only link the previous 2 moves together. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little uneasy. He didn't know if his choice was correct. At night, Zhang Xiaohua was still practicing his fist techniques like he was in the morning. He stayed far away from He Tianshu and the others. However, Zhang Xiaohua still found that he could still practice the fist techniques that he practiced in the morning at night. He couldn't spend the night watching it. Could it be that something would happen at night? Or was it because he was so stupid that he couldn't take a good rest? Zhang Xiaohua had his doubts for the first time. Practicing fist techniques in the morning and at night, and building blocks in the day. This was Zhang Xiaohua's happy life. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was enjoying this comfortable life, a pair of eyes kept observing him. It was the one-armed elder Yu. However, his qinggong was so good that even He Tianshu might not be able to detect him, let alone Zhang Xiaohua. However, when Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua diligently practicing the fist techniques that were popular in the pugilistic world, he was very surprised. He didn't know where this child learned so much rubbish. Didn't he know that it was better to eat a fresh peach than to eat a basket of rotten apricots? What was the use of practicing such rubbish? He really didn't understand. Elder Yu secretly shook his head. However, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's messy, incomplete, and error-filled moves in the morning, he almost fell down from the wall he was standing on. What kind of talent was this? It was simply the best in the world. Elder Yu's head shook so hard that it almost hit Grandma's bridge. The only thing that made him feel gratified was that Zhang Xiaohua would practice his fist techniques under the tree whenever he had the time. This hard work was really worthy of praise. However, how much could hard work be worth? Zhang Xiaohua's passion finally ignited at noon one day. On his way back, his mind kept thinking about those unrelated moves of his. Suddenly, there were 2 moves that were perfectly combined. Zhang Xiaohua was so happy that he almost jumped up. What did this mean? It meant that he had chosen the right path, and it was the right path for him to practice martial arts. At night, Zhang Xiaohua was even more hardworking. He practiced a few sets of fist techniques in a row. He wasn't tired, but the fingers on his right hand were really sore. He couldn't continue practicing. If he didn't make a fist, then it could only be a palm technique. If he made a mistake, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to try. Day after day, the fist techniques in Zhang Xiaohua's mind were slowly forgotten. In another river of memories, there were more and more incomplete moves, and there were more and more moves that could be combined. Zhang Xiaohua was constantly accumulating and improving. As for He Tianshu and the others, when they saw Zhang Xiaohua hiding under a tree and practicing alone, they really wanted to ask about it. However, when they thought of his amazing memory, they retreated. Anyway, Zhang Xiaohua was only practicing fist techniques and wouldn't go crazy, so they just let him be. In fact, He Tianshu might not have other thoughts. He knew about the injury on Zhang Xiaohua's right hand. Although he wasn't a doctor, for such a serious injury, as long as one practiced martial arts, most people would have a certain idea. That was, his right hand was crippled. Why? Fists were used to hit others. If it was a fracture, it would be fine. After the injury was healed, when the fist was used as a weapon, other bones could be used as support to protect the fractured area. However, Zhang Xiaohua's fracture was the entire palm. Imagine if such a fist was used. Where could it exert force? People often say that to kill 1,000 enemies, you lose 800 of your own men. If one's fist couldn't exert force, how could it exert force on the opponent? Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua was born with great strength. One arm had the strength of 250 kilograms. He was afraid that before the 250 kilograms of strength could make the opponent beg for mercy, the rebound force would cause Zhang Xiaohua's right hand to break again. Therefore, He Tianshu also intentionally or unintentionally wanted to stop Zhang Xiaohua from progressing further on the path of martial arts. What fist technique could Zhang Xiaohua practice by himself over there? It was just the same few moves over and over again. There wouldn't be any major mistakes. He was too lazy to look at it and let Zhang Xiaohua play by himself. There was always an end to everything. That night, Zhang Xiaohua finally practiced all the fist techniques in his memory. He secretly let out a sigh of relief. While practicing, the combination of moves also improved greatly. Not only were there many moves that were linked together, there were even 4, 5, and 10 moves that were perfectly linked together. However, practicing fist techniques was a simulated process while combining them was a real process of racking one's brain juice. This gave Zhang Xiaohua a headache. But fortunately, today was the last night. When he woke up tomorrow morning, it would be the time to see the real deal. He didn't know if these moves could really be combined into a complete set of fist techniques. That night, Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep with a heart full of worries. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua came to the tree early. He was already very familiar with the results of his practice. There were only 5 moves left that he still remembered clearly from yesterday's practice. Seeing that it was still early, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to use this time to combine these 5 moves into the fist technique that had already begun to take shape. But the result made Zhang Xiaohua surprised and happy. He was happy that these 5 moves were still perfectly complemented. He was surprised that this set of fist techniques still wasn't completely linked together. Zhang Xiaohua carefully thought for a moment in his mind. He realized that there were 101 moves in this set of fist techniques that he had combined. In the middle, there were 7 places that weren't linked together. He didn't know if it was because he was missing 7 moves or more. Zhang Xiaohua repeated these 101 moves twice. The gaps in the middle were only random links. He was sure that he had memorized it. As for whether he really remembered it, he could only think about it tomorrow. Now what he needed to consider was where he could find fist arts manuals and learn more fist arts to supplement his combination of fist arts. Chapter 110. Zhang Xiaohua happily walked towards the dining room. He had gained a lot from this morning, and it was also the most fulfilling and important morning he had ever had since he started practicing his fist arts. Everything pointed to a beautiful future, and all that was missing was that final push. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He jumped in fright and quickly stopped in his tracks. When he saw clearly, he patted his chest with lingering fear and said, "Elder Yu, even if your qinggong is powerful, you don't have to show off in front of me like this. As the saying goes, people can scare people to death." You appear and disappear so mysteriously. Fortunately, my heart is very strong. Boss Yu said with a straight face. How's your messy fist arts coming along? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shouted. Elder Yu, this is my privacy, how can you peek at it? If you want to see it, you can tell me. If you don't tell me, how would I know that you want to see it? If you don't tell me, you're hurting my heart. I'm going to report you to the village head. Elder Yu curled his lips and said, I wouldn't even bother to look at your erroneous moves even if they were placed in front of me. Peeping? I don't have that kind of free time. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, If you didn't see it, how would you know that I'm practicing my fist arts? How would you know that it's messy? Elder Yu said, Who can't see you hiding under the tree every day to practice your fist arts? Everyone only knows that you can't remember the entire set of fist arts, but I'm too embarrassed to say it. Do you think I don't have ears? Zhang Xiaohua's face turned red. He wanted to tell Elder Yu about his progress, but whether he was doing the right thing, and whether he could still remember the fist arts tomorrow, was still unknown. Thus he told himself in his heart, I'll endure it, okay? Then he raised his head and asked Elder Yu, Just treat it as me exercising my muscles and bones. You should at least encourage me. Why are you attacking my enthusiasm for no reason? Enough, what exactly do you want? If you don't say it, the food in the dining room will be finished by Nye Er and the rest. Elder Yu rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Nothing much. I just wanted to tell you to wait for me under the tree where you practiced tonight. I have something to tell you. Zhang Xiaohua drooped her head and said, Elder Yu, you've defeated me. Didn't you say that I wouldn't go tonight? Do I need you to tell me? Elder Yu's crafty scheme seemed to have succeeded as he said, I deliberately told you because I wanted you to pay attention to it and be mentally prepared. Secondly, there's a dish of pork belly this morning. It said that it's very delicious. Nye Er said that you always fight with him for it. He saw me just now and told me to tell you to go in a little later. He'll let you in after he's done eating. It's about time now. You should go. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Elder Yu's disrespectful behavior and said fiercely, Elder Yu, you're ruthless. After speaking, she dashed into the dining room like a wisp of smoke, as if there was a dog chasing after her. At night, Zhang Xiaohua waited under the tree as Elder Yu said. Elder Yu didn't say when he would come over, so he calmly practiced his set of martial arts. When he was done, he heard someone cheering beside him. He looked up and saw that it was Elder Yu. Elder Yu said with praise, Zhang Xiaohua, I see that you're quite smart. These messy moves were actually practiced by you. It's almost like a real set of martial arts. It seems like I have to look at you in a new light. Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, Elder Yu, I don't have a choice. You said this morning that I really can't remember the entire set of martial arts. I can only practice it myself. It's better than not having any martial arts to practice. Elder Yu nodded and said, Your determination to pursue martial arts is really good. There are thousands of paths to success in this world. As long as you can find one and persevere, even if there's no result, you won't regret it. One day, when you look back, you'll be able to console yourself with pride that you've worked hard. Zhang Xiaohua thanked him. Thank you for your guidance, Elder Yu. I'll work hard myself. Elder Yu asked again, Zhang Xiaohua, this set of martial arts of yours seems to be intermittent. You can't practice it in one go. It's like you can't finish a sentence and have to pause in the middle. Although the competition doesn't have to be particular about routines, an intermittent set of martial arts will cause you to not be able to practice to the best effect. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, Elder Yu, I heard that the highest realm of martial arts is to have no moves. My intermittent set of martial arts might be an evolution towards that realm. Elder Yu smiled and said, I don't know about the realm of no moves. That's a legendary realm. Perhaps only the top few in the martial arts world have it? Perhaps it's just a legend. Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to ask, Elder Yu, do you have a set of martial arts manuals? I want to take a look. Can you lend it to me? Elder Yu was stunned and said, Set of martial arts manuals? I do. How come you know how to read them? That's impossible. Aren't you illiterate? Zhang Xiaohua said, Elder Yu, you're looking down on me too much. I was illiterate before, But that doesn't mean I won't be able to read now or in the future. Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, "Oh right, the last time I went to your room, you were reading a book. Could it be that you learned how to read while you were recuperating?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Elder Yu is wise." Elder Yu smiled and said, "But martial arts manuals are different from reading. Being able to read doesn't mean you can understand them." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Elder Yu, you don't have to worry about this. I've seen their collection of martial arts manuals at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. I should be able to understand it." Elder Yu said, "All right then. Come to my room when you have time. I'll find a set of martial arts manuals for you to read." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Then I'll have to thank Elder Yu." She then asked, "Oh right, Elder Yu, why are you looking for me tonight?" Elder Yu looked at the full moon in the sky and said with a nostalgic tone, "Once you're in the martial arts world, you can't imagine the splendor of the martial arts world. Once you're in the martial arts world, time will make you grow old. Do you know, Zhang Xiaohua, there's a saying that goes, a person in the martial arts world has no choice. Only you have one foot in the martial arts world. But whether or not you're willing, the winds and waves of the martial arts world will blow you away, leaving you no choice but to go with the flow." Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, "Elder Yu, why are you telling me this? I haven't thought of entering the martial arts world yet." Elder Yu looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said seriously, "Zhang Xiaohua, as long as you want to practice martial arts and learn fist techniques, then you will inevitably be contaminated by the martial arts world. You can't avoid this. Although you're still young, you seem to have already chosen this path. Unless you give up on practicing martial arts now and wholeheartedly focus on farming in this villa." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "I only practice martial arts to protect my family. Although I'm envious of the hot-bloodedness of the martial arts world, with my skills, it's still too early for me." "Oh right, don't tell me you're going to tell me about the martial arts world today?" Elder Yu said, "Don't be anxious, Zhang Xiaohua. I'm telling you about the dangers of the martial arts world because I want you to know that if you insist on practicing martial arts, then you must have the awareness to enter the martial arts world. And to survive in the martial arts world, the most important thing is to have the means to protect your life." Zhang Xiaohua still didn't understand. Elder Yu sighed and said, "Actually, I'm telling you so much because I want you to know the dangers of the martial arts world and dispel your thoughts of practicing martial arts. You don't seem to understand the severity of the injury on your right hand." Zhang Xiaohua asked anxiously, "How serious is it, Elder Yu? Didn't the doctor say that I can still practice fist techniques?" Elder Yu said, "The doctor didn't lie to you. You can practice fist techniques, but your right hand is already crippled. It's not very possible for you to really compete with others." Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and said, "What's going on? Elder Yu, you must explain it to me clearly." Thus, Elder Yu told her about Zhang Xiaohua's injury from beginning to end. Zhang Xiaohua's face was ashen. She really didn't think too much about it, and thought that it would be fine as long as her bones healed. But now that she heard Elder Yu's words, she realized that things were far from as simple as she thought. Since her fist couldn't effectively attack others, then it was naturally crippled. Then what was the use of practicing fist techniques? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua's expression was strange, Elder Yu didn't continue speaking and waited quietly for a while. When Zhang Xiaohua's emotions calmed down a little, he asked again, "Then, do you still want to practice martial arts now?" Zhang Xiaohua still nodded and said with a determined gaze, "Practice martial arts, why not? Didn't you say just now that I've found my own path? I have to walk it to the end? Even if there's no result, I won't regret it. My right hand is crippled, but I still have my left hand. Even if I use my left hand, I can still practice fist techniques well and protect my family." Elder Yu's expression was as expected and said, "Child, you're really a person who walks the path to the end. I came here today for 2 reasons, and I've already said one. Since you don't want to give up on practicing martial arts, then I have a second suggestion. Are you willing to listen?" Zhang Xiaohua sucked in her lips and said, "Of course I'm willing, Elder Yu. I know you're doing this for my own good." Elder Yu said with gratification, "It's good that you know. I don't know how you moved me, but I actually find you pleasing to the eye. Then he continued, actually in the martial arts world, the fist isn't the only thing that can save a life. Most people use weapons such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds and the like. Now that your fist is crippled, you can still practice with weapons. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up and said, That's right, Elder Yu. You're really amazing, you even know this. Elder Yu smiled bitterly and said, This is just common knowledge in the martial arts world. Only an inexperienced child like you wouldn't know. Don't admire me so much, it'll make me feel ashamed. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I don't have a choice, I can only admire you. But what weapon do you think I should practice? Elder Yu said, Actually you can practice any weapon, as long as you can practice it well. Although there's a saying in the martial arts world, the spear is the king of 100 weapons, 100 staff skills, 1,000 saber skills, 10,000 sword skills, and so on. A person's aptitude and opportunities are different. Not all people practice the same weapon. In your right-hand situation, it's best to practice a staff technique. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. Staff technique? I've never seen anyone practice it before. Elder Yu, where can I find someone to teach me? Elder Yu was happy and said, With your aptitude and right hand, how can anyone teach you staff techniques? Don't even think about it. Zhang Xiaohua said worriedly, If no one teaches me such a simple staff technique, what's the point of saying so much? Elder Yu waited for a moment and said, I don't know staff techniques. Zhang Xiaohua pouted and said, If you don't know staff techniques, how are you going to teach me? Elder Yu said again, Our sect's martial arts will not be taught to outsiders before we accept a disciple. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, Master, please accept this little disciple's bow. She was about to kowtow when she finished speaking. However, she was stopped by Elder Yu's arm and said, Forget it. With your aptitude, I'll be angered to death if I teach you. Just save it and let me live for a few more years. When Zhang Xiaohua steadied himself, he continued, Although I can't take you as my disciple, it's a coincidence that I know a sword technique. I learned it by chance, so I can consider teaching it to you. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, Really, Elder Yu, you can teach me this sword technique. Elder Yu smiled and said, This sword technique is not a secret of my sect, so I naturally have the right to decide. I can teach it to you. Zhang Xiaohua said, Then thank you very much, Elder Yu. Why is there only one sword technique? Can't you teach me a few more? Don't be too stingy with me. Elder Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Zhang Xiaohua, you lack the foundation of Jianghu. When will I enlighten you? This sword technique is different from a fist technique. A fist technique is a complete set that contains both offense and defense. It's a complete set that can strengthen the body. Some fist techniques can even be used to cultivate internal strength. On the other hand, most sword techniques are a complete set that can be used from start to finish like a fist technique. However, there is also a sword technique that has only one move. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, One move? How do you do it? You can't possibly do it like the fist technique I practice, right? Elder Yu explained, In a competition between weapons, it's important to use one move to defeat the enemy. If you use a sword for half a day to determine the winner, then you'll be at a disadvantage. In a competition between experts, it's fine if you don't move, but once you move, the winner will be determined. Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and said, Then Elder Yu's sword technique with only one move, is it a high-quality sword technique? Elder Yu smiled and said, Whether it's high quality or not depends on the person using the sword. If I use it, then it's a killing sword technique, but if you use it, then it might be for others to watch. However, Zhang Xiaohua still asked, Why don't I understand? It's just a sword technique, how can you practice it? Elder Yu said, Whether this sword technique is a complete set or if there are other moves, I don't know. At that time, I only practiced a single move with 19 variations. Zhang Xiaohua was flabbergasted and said, One move? 19 variations? Elder Yu said with a smile, That's right. Just this one move has 19 variations and they're all offensive moves. I believe there are other defensive variations or moves, but I don't know of them. Zhang Xiaohua asked again. Then Elder Yu, I want to ask, is there anything different between sword techniques and fist techniques? It's just that there are usually different variations in one sword technique. Elder Yu nodded and said, You're right. Normal sword techniques are like this. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua understand why she could understand fist techniques, but not sword techniques. It turned out that there were so many things to pay attention to in the two techniques. Thinking that she could learn a more profound sword technique, Zhang Xiaohua became even more enthusiastic and said, Elder Yu, then please teach me now. Elder Yu said, I'm only telling you tonight. I can only teach you the specifics in the morning. You won't be able to see the subtle differences in the sword technique at night, so it's not easy to learn. Zhang Xiaohua said again. Then Elder Yu, can you let me see the power of this sword technique? Elder Yu pondered for a moment, and suddenly pulled out his sword from the scabbard with one hand, and pierced towards Zhang Xiaohua's throat from a strange angle. Although Zhang Xiaohua could feel the sword's momentum and direction, her body's reaction wasn't fast enough. Before Zhang Xiaohua could move, the tip of the sword was already at her chin. Zhang Xiaohua didn't pay attention to it, and threw a punch at the sword. The sword retracted and changed its angle at lightning speed, stopping in front of her eyes. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the sword tip that stopped in front of her, and felt a sense of helplessness. This kind of mysterious sword technique was simply too powerful. Elder Yu saw that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't moving, so he put the sword back into the scabbard. He said, How is it? Zhang Xiaohua, is this move good? Zhang Xiaohua said in annoyance. Of course it's good against a rookie like me, but I wonder how others will fare? For example, Captain He. Elder Yu said proudly. In front of this sword technique, you and He Tianshu are the same. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with stars. She wanted to learn this powerful move as soon as possible, but Elder Yu wasn't in a hurry and said, Since I promised you and came looking for you, I will naturally teach you this sword technique. However, you have to promise me two things. Zhang Xiaohua said, Please tell me. Even if it's to wash your socks for 10 years, I'm willing to do it. Elder Yu said, First, you can't tell others that I taught you this sword technique. Even if others know that you know this sword technique, you can't say that I taught it to you. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand, but she didn't ask. She only said, That means I can't tell Captain He and my second brother either. Elder Yu nodded. Zhang Xiaohua said again, Then can I teach this sword technique to my second brother? Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, This sword technique is too sharp. If it's spread, it will cause a storm in the martial arts world. It's better not to spread it. Zhang Xiaohua agreed. Elder Yu continued, The second thing is that once this sword technique is used, there will be no return. Blood will definitely be spilled, and it will harm heaven and earth. I hope that you won't use it casually, and you won't use it unless your life is in danger. Do you understand? Zhang Xiaohua fell into deep thought. Seeing that she understood, Elder Yu said, I'm sure you understand now that this is a very powerful sword technique. I'm teaching it to you today so that you can save your life. I don't want you to bring it to greater heights. I hope you won't let me down and stain your sword with the blood of innocence. Zhang Xiaohua bowed sincerely and said, Elder Yu, I understand your intentions. I will definitely remember what you said tonight and won't harm the innocent. Elder Yu smiled and said, Actually, with your temperament, I'm not worried. You've been practicing martial arts from morning to night. Although your aptitude isn't good, you're not afraid of hardships and work tirelessly. I'm sure you'll have a bright future in the future. Being able to learn this sword technique can be considered a bright pearl that doesn't need to be covered in dust. However, when you enter the martial arts world in the future, you have to be more careful and not be too hot-blooded. What you see may not be true. Zhang Xiaohua was confused. What you see may not be true. Please add it to your collection, thank you. Chapter 111. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua went to the tree as usual. Elder Yu hadn't moved yet, so Zhang Xiaohua stood still and started practicing his incomplete fist technique. Since he knew that Elder Yu would teach him a sword technique, Zhang Xiaohua didn't care as much as before about whether he would forget this fist technique. He was like a naughty child who was very concerned about his favorite toy, and was suddenly given an even more interesting toy by an adult. That child's longing for his old toy would fade away, and he wouldn't cry as much as before even if he lost it. Although he had such thoughts, when Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing the fist technique that he had learned last night, he still felt a burst of excitement. After all, according to his experience, this incomplete fist technique had been tested by his powerful memory for an entire night. Since he was able to practice it now, he was sure that he wouldn't forget it in the future. Zhang Xiaohua almost wanted to howl at the sky. The heavens have pity on me, Zhang Xiaohua. I, Zhang Xiaohua, can finally practice the incomplete fist technique. Moreover, there was a sucker coming to teach him a sword technique that he had never dreamed of. This kind of good luck was truly indescribable. Could it be that it was the culmination of his good luck over the past 10 years? He couldn't help but raise his head to look at the rising sun, and take a deep breath of the cool air. This was truly the blissful life of the countryside youth, Zhang Xiaohua. Just as he was immersed in his thoughts, a figure flashed past. Zhang Xiaohua raised his eyebrows. Although he couldn't see clearly, he could still feel that person's aura. It was undoubtedly Elder Yu. As expected, before that figure arrived, Elder Yu's voice could be heard. Zhang Xiaohua, you're already here? Zhang Xiaohua replied respectfully. Yes, Elder Yu. I've already practiced a fist technique. Elder Yu said, Hee, you're up pretty early. Looks like you're someone who can endure hardships. My judgment was right. Zhang Xiaohua muttered to herself. It's not that I don't want to sleep. The heavens have mercy on me. As soon as the sun rises, I have to wake up. I can't sleep anymore. Do you think I don't want to sleep more? Elder Yu naturally couldn't hear Zhang Xiaohua's silent criticism, so he continued. Actually, even though you're early, you should have said, Elder Yu, I just arrived too out of courtesy. That would have made me feel that you're a sensible child who's considerate of others. You should remember that when you're dating girls in the future. Zhang Xiaohua touched her chin. She was very puzzled, but she still firmly remembered it in her heart. Elder Yu was very satisfied with Zhang Xiaohua's attitude and said, All right, let's not talk about it anymore. Come, let's go over there. My sword technique is extraordinary. We can't let He Tianshu and the others steal it. After saying that, he brought Zhang Xiaohua around a few corners and arrived behind a tree. Even if He Tianshu wanted to see them, he would have to look around a few corners. When the two of them stood still, Elder Yu said seriously, Zhang Xiaohua, I've already told you the pros and cons of this sword technique last night. Do you remember it clearly? Zhang Xiaohua also put away her other thoughts and said, Yes, Elder Yu. I've already remembered it. I'll definitely do as you say in the future. Elder Yu continued, I obtained this sword technique from a damaged sheepskin. I don't know the name of the sword technique, so you can call it the nameless sword technique. Actually, a simple sword technique is the same as a simple fist technique. It won't be able to withstand a single blow from a vast amount of internal energy. However, a sword technique uses the sword as a medium. If it's used properly, an ingenious sword technique might be able to break through a person's internal energy defense. This sword technique is also different from other sword techniques. It has its own set of incantations that can drive your internal energy to support the sword and body, achieving the best timing to attack. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua interrupted. But Elder Yu, I don't know how to use internal energy. Elder Yu frowned and said, Don't interrupt me when I'm talking. It's easy to disturb my thoughts. If I forget a sentence or two, don't blame me if your cultivation goes berserk in the future. Zhang Xiaohua covered her mouth and nodded vigorously, indicating that she understood. Then, Elder Yu shook his head and recited a famous sword technique. If you want to cultivate a divine technique, you have to castrate yourself with a blade. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt that it was really profound. Why couldn't she understand it? But if she couldn't even understand the first sentence, how was she going to cultivate the sword techniques in the future? She couldn't help but feel anxious. She covered her mouth with her left hand and waved her right hand vigorously. When Elder Yu saw this, he frowned and said, Zhang Xiaohua, what's the matter? Zhang Xiaohua let go of her left hand and took a deep breath before asking, Elder Yu, what do you mean by castrate yourself with a blade? Elder Yu was stunned and said, "Why do you have to castrate yourself with a blade?" Zhang Xiaohua was also stunned and said, "Wasn't the first sentence of your sword technique, if you want to cultivate a divine technique, you have to castrate yourself with a blade?" When Elder Yu heard this, his old face turned red and he patted his forehead and said embarrassedly, my mistake. I've read too many Wuxia novels. Reality and fantasy overlap. The sentence I said earlier wasn't right. I'll repeat it again." Thus, Elder Yu seriously recited that awkward sword technique again. It wasn't much, only a few dozen words, but Zhang Xiaohua couldn't understand it no matter how hard she tried. Elder Yu didn't explain, and only let Zhang Xiaohua firmly remember it. With the previous example, how could Zhang Xiaohua dare to believe it? She let Elder Yu recite it 3 times. After she remembered it, she recited it a few more times in front of Elder Yu. She only relaxed when she saw Elder Yu nodding his head continuously. Then, Elder Yu drew out his long sword and formed a sword stance as he explained the first change to Zhang Xiaohua. Everything in the world seemed easy when others did it, but it was difficult when you did it yourself. Elder Yu explained the changes in this sword technique twice, and Zhang Xiaohua already understood it. However, when she picked up the branch and tried to execute it herself, she couldn't do what Elder Yu wanted no matter how hard she tried. After repeating this a few times, Elder Yu was annoyed. He looked at the sky and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, let's stop here for today. Go back and think about it carefully. Try to figure out the changes in the sword technique. That sword technique has to be constantly recited, so you must remember it well." Zhang Xiaohua asked awkwardly, "I know the changes in the sword technique, so I will naturally practice it diligently. However, I don't know anything about this sword technique." Elder Yu didn't think much of it and said, "The sword technique is the general principle of the changes in the sword technique. I will explain it to you in detail when you have a slight understanding of the sword technique. This general principle is related to the use of internal energy. Right now you don't have any internal energy, so it won't be good if I explain too much. You just have to memorize it well." Zhang Xiaohua finally understood and nodded in agreement. Then Zhang Xiaohua asked again, "Elder Yu, you promised me yesterday that you would let me borrow your fist technique manual. I wonder when is the right time?" Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, "Let's talk about it after you have comprehended the first change. Looking at a fist technique manual will distract you. This is your first time coming into contact with a sword technique, so let's talk about it after you have made some progress." Zhang Xiaohua thought about it and felt that it made sense. Moreover, perfecting this fist technique wasn't something that could be done overnight. She had already waited for several months, so there was no rush. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua kept revising the sword technique in her mind for the entire day. Whenever she had time, she would think about the changes in the sword technique. When she was free in the room, she would take out a tree branch and continuously practice it. However, she still couldn't perfectly execute it. Actually, this wasn't only the first time Zhang Xiaohua came into contact with a sword technique, so she couldn't understand it very well. Moreover, his right hand was injured, so his fingers couldn't be as nimble as usual. He couldn't control the strength and angle well, so it was very difficult for him to execute the first step of this sword technique. After dinner, Elder Yu slowly demonstrated the variations of the sword technique under the cover of dusk. He also explained the things that Zhang Xiaohua needed to pay attention to and the techniques to execute the sword technique. Zhang Xiaohua listened attentively and combined it with his own thoughts during the day. When he executed the sword technique, it looked quite good. However, Elder Yu still shook his head. Zhang Xiaohua practiced for a while more, but there was no progress. She couldn't help but feel discouraged. She looked at her right hand and thought to herself, "Is my right hand really crippled? From Elder Yu's words, this move doesn't seem too difficult. Why can't I practice it well?" Then her eyes lit up and she asked, "Elder Yu, look, my right hand isn't very nimble. Can I use my left hand to execute it?" Elder Yu didn't nod as she expected. Instead, he said quietly, "Zhang Xiaohua, are you trying to avoid some difficulties when you encounter them? If that's the case, then it's fine if you don't learn the sword technique. Why do you have to suffer?" Zhang Xiaohua argued, No, Elder Yu, I just feel that my right hand is too clumsy. I can't control the strength and position of the branch. That's why I thought of using my left hand. Elder Yu smiled. Actually, I've already thought of the problem that you're thinking about. It's just that most of the sword techniques in the pugilistic world are right-handed. There are very few left-handed sword techniques. These sword techniques are also recorded with the right hand as an example. The sword technique that I obtained is also recorded with the right hand. Moreover, the meridians of the left and right hand are different. The internal energy circulation in the sword technique is also recorded with the right hand. Naturally, I can't use the sword technique to teach you with the right hand. Moreover, where did I get my left arm from? Without a left arm, I can't change the sword technique from a right-hand sword to a left-hand sword. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was silent, Elder Yu continued. Therefore, I can't teach you how to use the sword with the left hand. Actually, there's another reason why I'm teaching you this sword technique. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled, so he asked, There's another reason? Elder Yu nodded his head solemnly and said, The most important part of this sword art is the palm and wrist. Your right hand is already injured, and if you don't train it properly, it might not recover. I'm imparting this sword art to you because I want you to train your right hand diligently. When you train for a long time, perhaps the heavens will open their eyes and let your right hand recover. If you retreat in the face of difficulties now, I reckon that not only will you not have any achievements in swordsmanship, but you will also not succeed in fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua finally understood and bowed deeply. Elder Yu, thank you for your kind intentions. This little one understands. I'll practice properly now. Elder Yu smiled. All right, there's no need to be so pretentious. It's only when you're able to practice well that you're truly capable. Zhang Xiaohua nodded his head and picked up the branch to practice again and again. He gradually got better and better, so much so that he didn't even notice Elder Yu's departure. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was practicing, the branch suddenly fell down. Zhang Xiaohua was startled awake and felt that his right hand was in extreme pain. Not only was his wrist sore, but his 5 fingers were also in extreme pain. Zhang Xiaohua's heart couldn't help but tremble. Could it be that the wound had ruptured again? He could only stand there and didn't dare to practice anymore. Only after a long time did the pain slowly lessen. Zhang Xiaohua knew that the wound didn't rupture again. However, there was a limit to how much he could train his fingers. He had overdone it today, so he had to be more careful in the future. If he overdid it every day, not only would it not achieve good results, it might even cause his fingers to become deformed and his bones to rupture again. Since he couldn't practice his sword technique, Zhang Xiaohua thought of his fist technique. Thus, he stood still and executed his 100 fist techniques one by one. Even though it wasn't continuous, it was still very satisfying. After he finished practicing his fist technique, Zhang Xiaohua saw that it was getting late. He used his left hand to carry the branch and slowly walked back. Zhang Xiaohua swung the branch as he walked. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Even though Elder Yu stopped him from trying to use his left hand, Elder Yu didn't say that he couldn't use his left hand. Even though the meridians in his left and right hands were different, he didn't have any internal energy right now and couldn't use any sword techniques. That meant that the sword techniques in his right hand could also be executed with his left hand. Elder Yu couldn't teach him how to use his left hand because he didn't have a left hand and couldn't understand the changes in his right hand. So why couldn't he use his left hand to execute the changes in his right hand? The more Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, the more excited he became, and the more he felt that it was possible. He looked around and felt that there was no one around. Thus, he placed the lantern to the side and walked to the side with the branch. He carefully thought about Elder Yu's teachings and slowly executed them with his left hand. After using his left hand for the past few months, even though Zhang Xiaohua wasn't born left-handed, his left hand was now more agile than a left-handed person. Elder Yu's teachings in the morning were actually executed as smoothly as flowing water, when Zhang Xiaohua slowly executed them with his left hand. The first time was still a little clumsy and uncoordinated, but after he finished, the next few times became more and more natural. This unexpected discovery made Zhang Xiaohua extremely happy. It was as if he had found another way to practice his sword technique. After he practiced a few more times and confirmed that he could really use his left hand, he picked up the lantern and went back to his room to rest. When Zhang Xiaohua woke up in the morning, he wanted to tell Elder Yu the good news as soon as possible. However, when he started practicing again, he encountered the same problem as when he was practicing his fist technique. That was, the changes in the sword technique he executed with his left hand were different from what Elder Yu taught him. There were many deviations. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua didn't forget anything this time. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless as he looked at the sword technique that he had used that had changed beyond recognition. The thought of reporting the good news to Elder Yu had been forcefully extinguished. Forget it. Rather than being mocked by others, I might as well enjoy it myself. Thinking that Elder Yu was about to arrive, Zhang Xiaohua stopped practicing with his left hand and stretched his muscles. Just as he was about to execute the 100 moves of his fist technique, Elder Yu arrived. Elder Yu asked about last night's practice. Zhang Xiaohua honestly told him about the condition of his right hand. He opened his mouth and wanted to say that he was using his left hand, but in the end he didn't. When Elder Yu heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, his expression became serious. He grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and carefully touched it. "And you practiced a little too much yesterday. Just as you guessed, your right hand is a little stiff. Rest for today and think about the changes during the day. Practice again at night." After he finished speaking, he once again reminded Zhang Xiaohua not to practice his sword technique during the day. Only then did he float away and go straight to the dining room. Seeing that she didn't have to practice her sword technique in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua could only continue practicing her fist technique. She practiced the 100 moves over and over again. The more she practiced, the smoother it became. This made her even more determined to complete the fist technique as soon as possible. She was very much looking forward to the feeling of practicing it from beginning to end once she completed the fist technique. After she finished practicing her fist technique, she looked at the sky. There was still some time before breakfast. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but put her thoughts on the sword in her left hand. Without hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua's figure disappeared into the forest. Holding a tree branch in her left hand, she executed the changes of the sword technique that she had memorized. Over and over again, her execution was very smooth. It seemed to be at the same level as Elder Yu's that day. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was immersed in the world of the sword in her left hand, suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua felt that there seemed to be a warm current flowing along her left arm following the changes of the sword technique. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but stop. But when she tried to sense it carefully, there was no trace of it. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua slowly executed it again. Still, she didn't feel anything. It seemed to be her imagination. Zhang Xiaohua quickly executed it again. Still, there was nothing. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. She really thought that it was her imagination. However, when Zhang Xiaohua continuously executed the sword technique again, she inadvertently felt the same feeling again. Only then did she know that she wasn't wrong. Thinking about it carefully, the appearance of this warm current seemed to be related to the speed at which she executed the sword technique. Just as she was about to try different speeds to find the warm current, a shout interrupted her. "Zhang Xiaohua, where are you?" Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head to listen. It was Nie Xiaoer's voice. She couldn't help but be confused. Why did this guy suddenly appear? When she came out of the forest, she realized that the sun was already high up in the sky. Everyone else was preparing to go work in the herb field. He hadn't even eaten breakfast yet. Seeing He Tianshu's concerned gaze, Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, "Captain He, I was practicing fist techniques in the forest and forgot the time." He Tianshu said, "Zhang Xiaohua, do you know what it means to be hasty? Some things can't be done overnight. You have to learn to be down to earth and walk step by step. I support hard work, but I don't agree to practicing martial arts without using your body. You've been hiding in the forest by yourself these past few days. Are you still practicing your fist techniques?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "You can say that." He Tianshu smiled and said, "I know that you're afraid that we'll laugh at you for practicing those incomplete fist techniques. Practice it if you want, but you have to think about your body. Your right hand hasn't completely recovered yet, so you have to pay attention to rest. If your right hand is worn out again, even if it's incomplete fist techniques, you can't practice them anymore. Zhang Xiaohua respectfully said, Captain He, I understand. I'll be careful in the future. He Tianshu patted her shoulder and said, Okay, it's good that you know. If you're not afraid of being embarrassed in the future, you should practice with us. We promise we won't laugh at you. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the three people beside her and couldn't help but smile. She still said, Forget it, Captain He. I'll practice by myself. He Tianshu said, Okay, up to you. I'll have Nie Xiao Air bring some breakfast to your room. Hurry up and eat, then go work in the herb field. Chapter 112. Zhang Xiaohua felt a burst of warmth when he heard the faint tone and the ordinary words. Although it was a normal concern, there was a saying, Don't be afraid of not knowing the goods, be afraid of comparing the goods. He Tianshu and the others' daily care for Zhang Xiaohua was immediately different from the grievances Zhang Xiaohua suffered in the Qingyi and Little Hat room. It was no wonder that Zhang Xiaohua was grateful. After reminding Zhang Xiaohua, He Tianshu and the others hurriedly left. The daily cultivation of the herbal field was still very easy to handle. In fact, it didn't matter if Zhang Xiaohua wasn't there. However, those seeds that had never sprouted were still a big mountain in He Tianshu's heart. He couldn't rest until he removed them. Zhang Xiaohua saw that they had left and hurried back to the house. Although the food in the house was simple, Zhang Xiaohua still ate it with relish. He then went out to be a monk and hit his own clock. During the lunch break, Zhang Xiaohua stayed in his house. He took a branch and carefully simulated the feeling that he found in the morning. Sure enough, when his speed reached a certain level, the warm current immediately appeared. Zhang Xiaohua had a realization in his heart. Although the reason for the warm current's appearance was still unclear, one thing was certain. That was, the changes of this sword move should be performed at this speed. It was the best. Since he had this understanding, Zhang Xiaohua continued to perform the changes of this sword move at this speed. The warm current also continued to appear. Zhang Xiaohua then realized that from the beginning of his sword move changes, the warm current came out from a certain place on his left shoulder. As the sword move changes were performed, the warm current flowed along his shoulder to his palm. It didn't disappear until the sword move changes were performed, and the warm current flowed to the branch in his left hand. After practicing for an entire afternoon, Zhang Xiaohua finally memorized the sword move changes with his left hand. The speed of the sword move had also stabilized. When he reached the point where he could casually perform a sword move change, the warm current would appear. Only then did he stop. The practice at night was out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. Under Elder Yu's supervision, Zhang Xiaohua performed the sword move with his right hand again. He originally thought that he wouldn't be able to succeed like before. However, perhaps it was because he had been practicing with his left hand, but Zhang Xiaohua's right hand was also fixed at the same speed. Unexpectedly, he was able to perform the sword move successfully. Even though it was just a beginner and there were many areas that could be improved, Zhang Xiaohua's right hand had just recovered from its injury. It should have something to do with the inflexibility of his fingers. Elder Yu was also very surprised. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua practicing in the morning, he thought that with his aptitude, he would need a few more days of practice before he could master the sword move changes. However, it seemed like he had underestimated him. Elder Yu was very happy in his heart. He let Zhang Xiaohua practice again. When he saw that he had really mastered it, he said, Zhang Xiaohua, I didn't think that you would be able to master it so quickly. This is a bit out of my expectations. However, you don't have to be proud. I only practiced this move for half a day. My aptitude is very ordinary in the Jianghu. If it was someone else with talent and intelligence, they would probably be able to master it after watching it twice. Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't feel any sense of pride. He immediately said, Elder Yu, don't worry. I know my own aptitude. This is the result of practicing many times. Elder Yu was very satisfied. Actually, there are times when a person's strength is limited. You don't have to worry too much about it. Just do your best. You must have gone through a lot of hardships to be able to learn the first move. I also know that. Since you've already learned the first move, I'll teach you the second one in a while. However, you shouldn't exhaust your injured bones at this stage. As the saying goes, more haste, less speed. You must remember this. Zhang Xiaohua was very happy when he heard that he could learn the second move. He didn't pay too much attention to Elder Yu's words. Actually, Elder Yu had wanted to teach Zhang Xiaohua the first move in the morning. However, he was very happy when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua had learned the first move. He took advantage of the moonlight and practiced the second move in the forest. When Zhang Xiaohua roughly looked through it, he explained it in detail. When he saw that Zhang Xiaohua's brows had relaxed, he knew that she had understood it. Only then did he slowly practice it again, and let Zhang Xiaohua look at it carefully again. Although there were 19 variations to this sword move, they were all based on this sword move. The first variation was the hardest to learn. After learning the first variation, the other variations would all be very similar. Naturally, it would be very easy to learn the second variation. Therefore, Elder Yu spent much less time teaching the second variation than the first variation. It was a pity that Elder Yu had overestimated Zhang Xiaohua's comprehension ability. Although Zhang Xiaohua should know how to practice it, or perhaps he had already learned it in his heart, the branch in his hands couldn't move according to Elder Yu's requirements no matter what. Under Elder Yu's tightly furrowed brows, Zhang Xiaohua helplessly put down the branch. After all, his right hand was starting to hurt again. He couldn't neglect the fundamentals and focus on trifles. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's dejection, Elder Yu helplessly patted him on the shoulder. It's fine. You should think about it more in your heart. This isn't the first time you've done this. Take a rest and continue practicing tomorrow. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little upset when he saw Elder Yu leave. No normal person liked to be looked down upon. Even if he knew that his aptitude wasn't good, he couldn't accept being looked down upon by others again and again. Thus he picked up the branch again. However, this time he had learned his lesson. He didn't use his right hand to practice it, but his left hand first. He first simulated the changes in his left hand in his mind before slowly moving his left hand. After repeating this a few times, he finally memorized the changes and found the feeling of noon. He followed the speed of the first move and as expected, the warm current appeared again, just like noon. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. He knew that he had found the right path. Thus he used the moonlight to practice. When he learned the second move, he practiced the first one again. He repeated this process repeatedly. It was as if Elder Yu was teaching him to use his left hand. The next day, Zhang Xiaohua still practiced a set of 100 incomplete fist moves, and practiced the 2 sword moves while waiting for Elder Yu to arrive. However, after waiting for a while and seeing that no one was coming, Zhang Xiaohua didn't wait any longer. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand had recovered after a long rest, and was no longer sore. He picked up the branch again, and repeated the sword moves in his mind as he practiced the second move at a certain speed. It was strange. He couldn't complete the move no matter what last night, but after a long rest he was able to perform it this morning. Although it wasn't as smooth as moving clouds and flowing water, he still managed to learn it. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have realized that to learn the second move, he had to use his left arm first. He had to learn it before he could use his right hand. This was really strange. Could it be that his right hand was injured? When Elder Yu checked on Zhang Xiaohua's progress at night, he also found it very strange. He couldn't help but blush. It was said that one should teach according to the student's aptitude. It seemed that his teaching method was wrong. Perhaps he really wasn't suitable for teaching. Why couldn't he explain such a simple change clearly? He still had to let Zhang Xiaohua go back and think about it carefully. Only then would he be able to learn it. Thus he said a little embarrassedly, "Zhang Xiaohua, this is my teaching not good?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. "No, Elder Yu. You taught me very well." Elder Yu said, "I don't say any more. I've taught a few disciples in the past, but they couldn't learn well and didn't make any name for themselves in the martial arts world. Today I'll teach you a few sword moves, but you still can't understand them." Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused. He could only say, "Elder Yu, I'm very grateful that you're the only one teaching me sword moves." If I can't learn it, it's because my aptitude isn't good enough. I remember telling my second brother that if others can learn it once, I'll practice it 10 times, 20 times, 100 times until I learn it. When Elder Yu heard this, he agreed in his heart. You're right. Although there's no lack of talented people in the martial arts world, they're still very rare. People like you and I are just ordinary people. Naturally, we have to put in more effort than others in order to achieve good results. Zhang Xiaohua, you've done very well. After that, Elder Yu didn't consider whether it was his teaching method or Zhang Xiaohua's comprehension. Just like a few days ago, he carefully explained the sword moves and slowly demonstrated them. When Zhang Xiaohua felt that she understood, he turned around and left, leaving Zhang Xiaohua alone to practice. He still didn't appear the next morning, letting Zhang Xiaohua experience it herself. He only appeared the next night to check on her learning progress. In this way, Zhang Xiaohua learned one move a day until she learned the 16th move. However, there was a problem with the 17th move. After Elder Yu taught her, Zhang Xiaohua memorized it in her heart. She could use her left hand, but the warm current didn't appear. Zhang Xiaohua thought that there was a problem with her speed. She tried again and again, but the warm current still didn't appear. Then, Zhang Xiaohua tried to use her right hand, but it just didn't work. There were always some details that she couldn't handle. Zhang Xiaohua practiced alone for another 2 days, but she still couldn't learn the 17th move. Elder Yu thought about it and concluded that it was because her right hand hadn't fully recovered and wasn't as nimble as a normal person. Thus he began to teach her the 18th and 19th moves. As Elder Yu expected, Zhang Xiaohua still couldn't learn the last 2 moves. After a few days, Elder Yu called Zhang Xiaohua to the forest and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I've already taught you the 19 moves. Actually, I'm already very satisfied that you can learn 16 moves. To be honest, I thought that you could learn half of them, but you've already greatly exceeded my expectations. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little sour in her heart when she heard Elder Yu's words. However, the situation was as such and she couldn't refute it at all. Elder Yu continued. You should have already memorized the remaining 3 moves. When your right hand fully recovers, you can continue to practice. Actually, the reason why I'm teaching you this move is to save your life. If you don't provoke someone too powerful, I believe that these 16 moves should be able to save your life. Also, what you've learned now is only the tip of the iceberg and doesn't have much power. You still have to memorize the sword technique diligently. When you learn inner strength one day, you'll be able to use it with the sword technique to display the true power of this sword technique. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but ask, then what is its true power like? Elder Yu smiled and said, Look. As he spoke, he used all his strength to stab the big tree in front of him. The sharp edge of the sword pierced 3 centimeters into the tree. Then Elder Yu circulated his qi and used a sword move to stab the tree. With a piercing sound, the long sword pierced deeply into the tree as if it was going to pierce through it. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The difference was too big. Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua's expression and naturally knew what she was thinking. He said, See Zhang Xiaohua? If you don't learn inner strength, you're like a frog at the bottom of a well. You'll always be in a small circle and will never be able to understand the power of inner strength. Even if you learn the best sword technique in the world, the exquisite sword moves are still just a form. Without the soul of inner strength, you can never be considered a first-rate expert. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's disappointed expression, he said, I know you want to learn inner strength, but I can't teach it to you. I hope that you'll have the chance to learn a profound inner strength cultivation method in the future. Alright, this is all I can teach you. Practice well, and hope that this sword move can help you in the future. With that, he flicked his sleeves and turned to leave. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but call out, Elder Yu. Elder Yu turned around and asked, What's the matter? Zhang Xiaohua opened his mouth and said after a while, Thank you, Elder Yu. Elder Yu smiled and said, No need, Zhang Xiaohua. Practice well and I hope you'll succeed. With that, he floated away. Looking at Elder Yu's one-armed figure, Zhang Xiaohua felt extremely grateful. He wasn't related to Elder Yu in any way, and they didn't see each other often in the past. Yet he had received such a huge favor from Elder Yu. and he had even imparted a sword technique to him. Although Elder Yu didn't mind it, how could he not take it seriously? Actually, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to tell Elder Yu about the sword in her left hand, but she didn't know where to start. Most of the 16 transformations on her left hand had changed beyond recognition. If she told Elder Yu now, would she let him know that she wasn't a good-for-nothing? If she could comprehend the side path, could she also use a sword with her left hand? However, when she thought about the might of Elder Yu's inner strength sword move, she didn't want to say it. What was her little bit of cleverness? She shouldn't show it off. However, Zhang Xiaohua really wanted to ask Elder Yu about the warm current. After standing for a while, Elder Yu was already far away. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua gather her thoughts and pick up the branch to practice in the forest. After practicing the transformations of the sword move, she felt bored and her right hand was sore, so she switched to her left hand. When she practiced the sword move with her left hand, it was different. The warm current flowed through her left arm, making it feel very comfortable. After the 16 transformations of the sword move had been mutated by Zhang Xiaohua, she could actually link them together. From the first to the 16th transformations, in addition to the changes in her footwork, it was really like a set of sword moves. Practicing to her heart's content, she started practicing non-stop and entered a very peaceful state. She only wanted to wave the sword in her left hand around, as though she was born for the sword. She practiced from the first to the 16th transformations, then continued to practice the first transformations. After practicing for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua felt that there was a stuffy feeling in her chest. She wanted to spit it out, but she couldn't find a way to vent it. As the sword moved, she seemed to have found a target. Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth and let out a long sigh of relief. Then, she followed the sword move and stabbed forward with the branch in her left hand. The warm current in her left arm naturally flowed along with it. Just as the branch was about to hit the tree in front of her, she heard a muffled sound, and the branch actually pierced into the trunk. Then she broke into pieces and fell to the ground. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua wake up from her dream. She stared blankly at the branch in her hand, and then at the branch in front of her. She couldn't believe that she had done this. If Elder Yu had used his strength to push the sword 3 inches into the tree trunk, Zhang Xiaohua felt that if she used her strength, she might be able to push the sword 5 inches into the tree trunk. However, it was impossible for Zhang Xiaohua to do it like how Elder Yu had used his internal energy. Furthermore, it was impossible for Zhang Xiaohua to do it. Was she considered an expert? However, when she walked forward and used her thumb and index finger to pinch the branch, she easily pulled it out without using much strength. Only then did she see that there was a hole in the tree trunk that was neither deep nor shallow. It was just a hole. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh at herself. She looked at herself as a poor person who had just received a few dozen taels of silver. She thought that she knew that she was the richest person in the world, but she didn't know that this amount of silver was a joke in the eyes of the real rich. She thought that her martial arts were so good that she could push the branch into the tree trunk, but now, it seemed that it was just a small hole. Shaking her head, Zhang Xiaohua casually threw away the branch in her hand. Feeling that the sky was getting dark, she picked up the lantern and slowly walked back into the house. Only that small hole was left in the tree trunk. The pitiful Zhang Xiaohua was regretting his arrogance, but he didn't know that he had really underestimated himself this time. Even if it was Elder Yu, he wouldn't dare to say that he could push the branch into the tree trunk and leave a hole. If Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua's sword, his eyes would definitely pop out. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua only saw the sharpness of the sword. Although he knew that the blunt part of the branch wouldn't be easy to push into the tree trunk, his usual attitude confirmed that he had made a mistake in his judgment. Sigh, the details determine success or failure. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to still be very inexperienced. He still had a long way to go. However, Zhang Xiaohua, who was walking on the road, didn't have this awareness. He had long abandoned the joy from before, and was muttering in his heart, "I've already learned this sword technique from Elder Yu. So when should I go to Elder Yu to get the fist manual?" Chapter 113. The next day, it was raining heavily. After the autumn rain and the cold, the weather had already turned cold. There wasn't much work to do in the medicine field, so He Tianshu brought Nie Xiao Air and the rest to walk around the medicine field before returning. Zhang Xiaohua was still thinking about her fist technique. When He Tianshu returned, she couldn't wait to find out where Elder Yu lived. She opened an umbrella and walked towards the backyard. Elder Yu lived quite a distance away from Zhang Xiaohua's courtyard, but it was very close to the dining hall. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but think maliciously. Was it because Elder Yu was old and couldn't walk properly? Was it because he didn't want to delay the meal? Even with Elder Yu's martial arts skills, he wasn't at the level where he could walk in the rain without getting wet. Thus he stayed in the house and didn't go out. Zhang Xiaohua knocked on the door and entered the house. Elder Yu's house was very simple. It was even cleaner than Zhang Xiaohua's house, but there were a few more cabinets. When Zhang Xiaohua entered the house, Elder Yu was sitting cross-legged on the Kong bed. When he saw that it was Zhang Xiaohua, he slowly got off the bed and looked at Zhang Xiaohua's wet shoulders. Zhang Xiaohua, it's raining so heavily. Why didn't you stay in the house and think about that sword technique? What are you doing here? Could it be that you've improved again after a night? Zhang Xiaohua bitterly smiled and said, Elder Yu, do you think I'm a genius that only appears once every 50 years? Just those 16 transformations will take me a lifetime to learn, and I won't be able to master them like the back of my hand. Not to mention the other 3 transformations. Look at my hand. As she spoke, she raised her right hand in front of Elder Yu and bent her fingers a few times. She continued, perhaps I'll only be able to learn the essence of the other 3 variations when my right hand can fully form a fist. Elder Yu comforted Zhang Xiaohua at this time. You don't have to give up. When the heavens are about to give you a great responsibility, they must first test your will. Perhaps this is the heavens' test for you. Zhang Xiaohua declined to comment and said, I've read this sentence in a book before. Maybe. Then he frowned and said, Elder Yu, don't change the topic. I'm here today to borrow your fist manual. You promised me before. Elder Yu slapped his forehead and said, Look at my memory, I'm really old now. I almost forgot. However, the fist art you are learning. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. Elder Yu, are you trying to persuade me again? Elder Yu fell silent. Zhang Xiaohua said, In life, one must have some goals. Before I came to Pingyang City, I wanted to practice martial arts. If I gave up because of the injury on my arm, wouldn't it be too hasty? Moreover, my injuries aren't that serious. Elder Yu, don't you only have a right arm? Aren't you also a martial arts expert? Elder Yu smiled bitterly and said, I knew you would say this to me. Actually, you only know one thing and not the other. First of all, before I was injured, my martial arts were only second-rate in Jianghu. Now that I have lost my left arm, my martial arts have been reduced to less than 60% of my peak. Moreover, I only got injured after I achieved great success in my martial arts. Although it affected my martial arts, it wasn't as serious as yours. For someone like you to have such a big problem in your palm before you started practicing martial arts, it would be difficult for you to achieve great success, no matter what martial arts you practice. It's just like how a person's family has declined before he reached adulthood. If you want him to revive his family business, it will be extremely difficult. However, if he succeeds in starting his own business and his family falls, it will naturally be much easier for him to start his own business. It will even be more glorious than the former. When Zhang Xiaohua heard Elder Yu's words, her face was as gloomy as the sky outside. After a while she said, But I'm still unwilling to accept it. Elder Yu sighed and said, Seeing how crazily you practice, I knew you wouldn't be able to let it go. That's why I taught you the sword moves. Do as you wish. The martial arts manual is on the bookshelf over there. I haven't looked at it in a long time. Zhang Xiaohua followed his words and walked to a bookshelf. Sure enough, there were many books on the shelf. When she looked carefully, there were martial arts manuals and sword manuals. The collection was quite extensive. However, when Zhang Xiaohua flipped through the 10 or so manuals, she realized that they were all martial arts manuals that she had seen at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency before. They were also some of the more popular martial arts manuals in the martial arts world. Elder Yu also looked at Zhang Xiaohua flipping through this and that and felt that it was strange. He asked, "You can take whichever book you want to read. Remember to return it to me." Zhang Xiaohua turned around and asked, "Elder Yu, are there any other martial arts manuals? These seem to be common martial arts manuals in the martial arts world." Elder Yu smiled and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, although these martial arts manuals are common in the martial arts world, they aren't something that just anyone can find. You can pick one and look at it first. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. I naturally don't have any of the martial arts manuals in the sect, so you don't have to look through them. If I could teach you, I would have told you long ago." Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Then can you tell me what martial arts are taught in the sect? Or martial arts manuals?" Elder Yu thought for a while, but still shook his head and said, "These things, if you're fated, you'll know sooner or later. If not, what's the use of telling you? It'll only add to your worries." Then he pointed to the martial arts manuals and said, "Don't look down on these manuals. Although they're the most common, they're also the most practical. After so many years and so many people's tests, if you can master them, it'll be an amazing thing." Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but blush and said, "This Elder Yu, you know my aptitude. I always forget the moves, so there's nothing I can do about it." Elder Yu blinked and said, "Then all the more you should read through a manual properly. Only then will you be able to memorize it properly." Zhang Xiaohua said, "It's not like that, Elder Yu. Sai, forget it, I'll just read this one." Seeing that she couldn't win against Elder Yu, Zhang Xiaohua didn't intend to explain, and casually took out a manual. She didn't even look at the name and put it away. She bid farewell to Elder Yu and returned with a lack of interest. Elder Yu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's thin back and shook his head helplessly. He said in a low voice, "This child, Sai, she's really a little stubborn." Since he had some emotions, he stopped meditating and walked down from the Kong bed to the bookshelf that Zhang Xiaohua was looking at. Looking at the dusty bookshelf, Elder Yu couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He didn't know how long it had been since he looked at these things. Ever since he was injured, he had lost a lot of his ambition, and didn't have the same motivation as Zhang Xiaohua. Perhaps he should do something else? After Elder Yu finished sighing, he turned around and suddenly found a book wedged between the bookshelf. He carefully pulled it out with a stick, and found that it was another martial arts manual. He didn't know when it had fallen in there. Elder Yu blew the dust off it, and casually placed it back on the shelf. Zhang Xiaohua held onto the manual, and held onto the umbrella as she walked back. She was very depressed. To be honest, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. She originally thought that she could get a few manuals from Elder Yu that she hadn't learned before to make up for her moves. Who knew that she would end up empty-handed? This result was something that she had never expected. But when he thought about it, this was normal. The Lotus Flower Escort Agency's martial arts training hall was a place for teaching and educating people. Naturally, there would be a sufficient collection of fist art manuals. Elder Yu, on the other hand, was merely interested in it. Since he could finish reading all the fist art manuals in the martial arts training hall, Elder Yu shouldn't have any new discoveries. In fact, it would be strange if Elder Yu really found a fist art manual that he hadn't seen in the escort agency. She had been too impatient before. Thinking up to this point, Zhang Xiaohua's depression lessened by half. The only thing left was where to find a manual. Did she have to go to the Misty School to find one? This was too unrealistic. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua walked back to the small courtyard. The moment she entered the small courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua saw that the door to her room was open from afar. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel strange. Could it be that she didn't close the door when she went out? That's not right. She seemed to have closed the door before leaving. When she got closer, she heard a familiar voice coming from the room. Although she couldn't hear it clearly due to the sound of the rain, Zhang Xiaohua still quickened her footsteps and ran to the door shouting, "Second brother, is that you?" As expected, Zhang Xiaohu's voice sounded from inside the room. "Xiaohua, you're back?" When Zhang Xiaohua entered the room, she saw that other than Zhang Xiaohu, He Tianshu, and Li Jinfeng were also in the room. Zhang Xiaohu walked to the door and took the umbrella from Zhang Xiaohua's hands and helped her put it away. He was as attentive as when he was in Zhang Xiaohu's room at the escort agency. He Tianshu stood in the middle of the room. When he saw that Zhang Xiaohua had returned, he said to Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng, "Zhang Xiaohua is back, so I won't keep you company. You're welcome to come by often in the future." Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng quickly said, "Thank you, Captain He. Let's talk more in the future if there's a chance." He Tianshu nodded at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Take good care of your brother and friends." Then he went back to his room. Zhang Xiaohua watched as He Tianshu left. He turned around and asked excitedly, "Second brother, why did you suddenly come to my place today?" "Oh right, young Master Li, are you free too?" Li Jinfeng walked forward and said with a smile, "You little rascal, you ran quite fast. I said that I would send you back to the villa last time. When I arrived at the escort agency after you were almost recovered, you and your second brother were not there. I asked around and found out that you had returned long ago. Your second brother actually ran out too. I made a wasted trip. It's my day off today. I was bored at the academy, so I came out. I wanted to see you, but I didn't know how to find you. That's why I dragged your second brother over." Zhang Xiaohua asked again, "Second brother, when did you come back? Did it go well?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "I've been back for a few days. Didn't I tell you that it was near Pingyang City? It's not that far. This is the influence of the Misty School. We just went out to gain experience. It's not a big deal." Then he looked at Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and said, "I've always wanted to come and see you. I don't know how your hand has recovered. There's nothing going on at the Heavy Rain Escort Agency today. We were just staying in the room when young Master Li came. Haha, we came to see you together." Zhang Xiaohua knew that her second brother and Li Jinfeng were worried about her. She stretched out her right hand and made a few forceful grabs. "Look, it's fine now." Leader, he said that as long as I practice diligently, there's still hope for me to recover. Zhang Xiaohu did not expose her and said, "That's the best. Take your time and practice more." Li Jinfeng was also very happy. He said, "That's great. I'll be able to see you practice martial arts very soon." "Oh right, I saw that there were books on your bed and table. Looks like you're also very focused on your studies. Not bad, you're actually proficient in both literature and martial arts." Zhang Xiaohua was a little embarrassed. She said, "I'm not as good as young Master Li said. I just blindly read when I have nothing to do." Then Zhang Xiaohua talked about some of the problems she encountered when reading books with Li Jinfeng. There were many questions, but when Li Jinfeng finished answering them all, he couldn't help but have a whole new level of respect for Zhang Xiaohua. He said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you're really not bad. If you didn't look at these questions in depth, you wouldn't have such deep feelings. You're really amazing. I admire you." Hearing Li Jinfeng praise his younger brother, Zhang Xiaohu was very happy. When the two finished their discussion, he interrupted and asked, "Xiaohua, are you still practicing martial arts?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "I'm still practicing, but I haven't made any progress." Zhang Xiaohu misunderstood. He thought that he was still practicing forgetful things and didn't know about Zhang Xiaohua's true situation. He smiled and said, "It's okay. Practice slowly. One day you'll succeed." Zhang Xiaohua said, "I know, second brother. I haven't given up. I'm still working hard." "Oh right, what about that internal strength cultivation method of yours?" Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's expectant face, Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly and said, "Sai, don't be envious of me. This inner strength mantra is not that mysterious. You'll know when you start practicing it. Right now, I'm just barely able to sense qi. I've been running darts for a while now, so I haven't been practicing it myself. In my free time, I've been practicing my 6 complementary fists. However, I've listened to you and practiced the South Branch fists from time to time. After all, I've learned something from it. I've learned a lot from it." Zhang Xiaohua happily listened to his second brother's words. He was happy for his second brother's improvement. Suddenly, he seemed to have grasped something. But when he thought about it carefully, he didn't understand. Thus, he used his left hand to grab Zhang Xiaohu's arm and urgently asked, "Second brother, what did you just say? Say it again?" Zhang Xiaohu's mouth was crooked. He gasped in pain and said, "Xiaohua, hurry and let go. Be gentle. Why did you use so much strength?" Zhang Xiaohua finally realized that he had lost his composure. He quickly let go and said embarrassedly, Second brother, I'm sorry. What you said just now seemed to have reminded me of something. Don't mind it. Hurry and say it again." Zhang Xiaohu was confused and said, "Didn't I just say that I listened to your suggestion and practiced the Nanji Quan? It's a good idea to learn from my previous fist techniques." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "That's not it. What else?" Zhang Xiaohu frowned and said, "Also, the internal strength cultivation method isn't as mysterious as you think. Right now, I only have a bit of qi. I didn't say anything else." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment again, but still shook his head. Zhang Xiaohu had no choice and said, "That's all. I didn't say anything else. When I was running darts, I couldn't calm down and practice the internal strength cultivation method. I could only practice fist techniques. Other than the Liuhe Quan and the Nanji Quan, I'm not very familiar with the others." Hearing the three words Liuhe Quan, Zhang Xiaohua's mind flashed. That's right. It's this Liuhe Quan. No wonder second brother said something that moved him so much. He had practiced more than 100 fist techniques, but he didn't learn this Liuhe Quan. What did it mean to turn a blind eye to something familiar? It was probably referring to this kind of situation. Actually, this matter was extremely coincidental. When He Tianshu was teaching Zhang Xiaohua fist techniques, Zhang Xiaohua mentioned that he had seen others execute the Liuhe Quan, but he didn't manage to master even half a move. Furthermore, the Liuhe Quan was famous for its complexity. When He Tianshu saw Zhang Xiaohua's terrifying memory, he couldn't remember to teach him this fist technique no matter what. Perhaps he had chosen to forget. When Zhang Xiaohua was studying the fist technique manual at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, it wasn't that the agency didn't have a Liuhe Quan fist technique manual. However, because Zhang Xiaohu was famous for practicing the Liuhe Quan, many people went to the library to borrow the Liuhe Quan fist technique manual to study, hoping to learn something from it. Therefore, the library's fist technique manual had long been borrowed, and Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't see it. During the days when Zhang Xiaohu was practicing the Liuhe Quan at the agency, Zhang Xiaohua was concentrating on studying other fist technique manuals. Of course, he didn't think of learning the fist technique that his second brother was so good at. In fact, the fist technique manual that fell from the gap of the bookshelf in Elder Yu's room might have been the Liuhe Quan fist technique manual. In short, due to various coincidences, Zhang Xiaohua finally remembered that he still had a fist technique that he was most familiar with. It was also the fist technique that he had seen for the first time, the Liuhe Quan fist technique. He hadn't learned it yet. Fate makes fools of people. However, since he found another fist technique that he hadn't learned yet, Zhang Xiaohua was still half happy and half worried. He might be able to complete the Liuhe Quan fist technique, or he might not. In short, he couldn't hold too much hope this time. He only hoped that he could learn a move or half a move from it. Since the person who could teach him this fist technique was his second brother, there was no need for Zhang Xiaohua to be polite. He immediately asked Zhang Xiaohu to set up a stance and teach him. Zhang Xiaohu was even more confused. They had only spoken for a short while, and this younger brother of his was already asking him to teach him the Liuhe Quan fist technique. Although he didn't mind, when he looked at Li Jinfeng standing beside him and sized up the slightly cramped room, Zhang Xiaohu was a little hesitant. Li Jinfeng seemed to have noticed Zhang Xiaohu's hesitation and hurriedly said, "Brother Zhang, you don't have to mind me. I know Xiaohua's temperament. Moreover, he is also my initiate student. I am also very happy to see his improvement." Zhang Xiaohua finally realized his rudeness and said, "My apologies, young Master Li. I will talk to you after I finish learning this fist technique." Zhang Xiaohu then said, "Xiaohua, isn't this room a little small? You might not be able to use it. My room at the escort agency is bigger than this, so I can use it in the room." Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his chin and said, "It's okay, second brother. You can practice slowly and just teach me. I will forget all these moves." Li Jinfeng was stunned when he heard this. What was this? He was teaching you a fist technique, and you said you would forget it. Then why was he teaching you? Zhang Xiaohu understood his meaning. He tilted his head and thought for a moment, then said, "All right, since it's like this, I will start teaching you now." Chapter 114. Finally, Zhang Xiaohu found out about his brother's abnormal memory. Zhang Xiaohu slowly practiced the Liuhequan from beginning to end 3 times. When he asked Zhang Xiaohua, she said she didn't remember, so Zhang Xiaohu had no choice but to continue practicing for the 4th time. Just as he got into a fighting stance, he was stopped by Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Second brother, don't practice for now. Let me practice it once. Watch." Thus, under Zhang Xiaohu's guidance, Zhang Xiaohua finally practiced the Liuhequan from beginning to end. Zhang Xiaohua didn't feel anything, but Zhang Xiaohu's head was covered in sweat. It was more tiring than practicing 10 times himself. Li Jinfeng, who was beside him, was even more puzzled. He knew Zhang Xiaohua's talent in learning literature very well. It was because of his abnormal memory that he was able to finish reading Shuo Wenjie in such a short time. Why did it become like this when it came to learning fist techniques? He really didn't understand. The thing that made Li Jinfeng vomit blood was yet to come. When Zhang Xiaohu took a short break, he asked Zhang Xiaohua if she had mastered it. Did he need to teach her for a while more? His concern was expressed in his words. However, Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "No need, second brother. It's fine as long as I can finish practicing it once." Li Jinfeng also chimed in. "Xiaohua, it's better if you practice a few more times. It's not easy for your second brother to come here. When he leaves, if you still want to learn, you won't be able to find him." Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "It's fine, I've already learned it." Zhang Xiaohu thought that he was afraid that he would be tired, so he smiled and said, "Xiaohua, it's okay. Second brother isn't tired. Come, I'll practice again. Let's see." After saying that, he slowly practiced again. As he practiced, he explained his experience to her according to his moves, such as when to make a move, the angle of the move, the strength, and so on. Zhang Xiaohua nodded repeatedly as she listened. She thought, second brother is really good at practicing. However, he didn't seem to care. Li Jinfeng shook his head when he saw this. When Zhang Xiaohu was done, he withdrew his moves and stood to the side. He said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, why don't you practice once too? Let me see and give you some pointers." Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly waved her hand and said, "There's no need, second brother. You know that I've already learned it. I've also remembered what you said just now." Zhang Xiaohu was a little displeased and said, "Hurry up and practice. Let me see if you've learned it." Even at this point, Zhang Xiaohu still didn't really believe what Zhang Xiaohua had told him before. Not being able to learn all the fist techniques? Maybe it was because others didn't teach her well. He taught her in detail. If she had the aptitude that Li Jinfeng said that Zhang Xiaohua had, how could she not learn it? Unfortunately, the truth was really a blow to their confidence. Unable to withstand Zhang Xiaohu's urging, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to take up the starting position and practice the Liuhequan that she had just learned. What surprised the two of them was that the valiant Zhang Xiaohua had only practiced 6 moves before she forgot the following moves. Under Zhang Xiaohu's reminder, she continued to practice more than 10 moves. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohu reminded her again and again. Finally, after 5 or 6 reminders, Zhang Xiaohua finally finished practicing. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's innocent eyes, Zhang Xiaohu also asked helplessly, "Xiaohua, do you always practice like this when you learn fist techniques?" Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's affirmative nod, Zhang Xiaohu patted his shoulder and said, "It's been hard on you, Xiaohua." Li Jinfeng came over and asked, "Xiaohua, I think it's very strange. This move isn't very complicated. Although I haven't practiced fist techniques before, just based on my memory and watching the two of you demonstrate just now, I can also remember many moves." After saying that, Li Jinfeng rolled up his sleeves and practiced the Liuhequan. He was actually hit by more than 10 moves before he stopped. Then he asked Zhang Xiaohua, "Look, with my aptitude, I can learn more than 10 moves. How can you only remember 6 moves? It's really strange." Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said, "Brotherly, to be honest, I really don't know. All the fist techniques I practice are like this. I forget a lot of each set of fist techniques." Li Jinfeng seemed to have seen the most miraculous thing in the world and said, "It's really inconceivable. You can even memorize the Shuawen Jiezi. So how can you not even remember this?" Zhang Xiaohua said curiously, "Brotherly, what's so strange about this? The Shuawen Jiezi is just a book for young children. Practicing fist techniques is something that requires a lot of brain power. It can't be compared." Li Jinfeng smiled bitterly and didn't say anything. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu said, "Then what about the fist technique manual from the escort agency? It's also something written in words. Can you remember it?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "I remember that very clearly." Zhang Xiaohu slapped his forehead and said, "Then it's settled. Tomorrow I'll borrow the Liuhequan fist technique manual from the library." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "There's no need, second brother. I've already practiced all the fist techniques that I memorized a few months ago. I've basically forgotten all of them." Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng both opened their mouths wide. Zhang Xiaohua said, "No matter if it's a fist technique manual or someone else's, as long as I practice it, I'll forget most of it. Those that I haven't forgotten, I won't forget them. As for how much I can remember, I'll only know tomorrow morning." Faint, Li Jinfeng screamed. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with reverence and muttered, "Could it be that this is the legendary don't ask for a deep understanding?" After listening to Zhang Xiaohua's explanation, and thinking about the situation with Zhang Xiaohua just now, Zhang Xiaohu finally believed what his younger brother said. However, he could only spread out his hands and couldn't help. His younger brother said that everyone had their own path. Their own path was only suitable for themselves. Others couldn't help even if they wanted to. Lunch was eaten with He Tianshu and the others in the dining room. Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng were full of praise for the food at Huanxi Manor. However, during the meal, Li Jinfeng looked around, which made Zhang Xiaohua very puzzled. This scholar usually paid attention to etiquette. Why was he so careless today? However, before Zhang Xiaohua could figure it out, Li Jinfeng said it himself. On the way back to the small house, Li Jinfeng secretly pulled Zhang Xiaohua and whispered, "Xiaohua, why didn't I see Miss Qiu Tong when we were eating?" Only then did Zhang Xiaohua realize that he was not the only reason this scholar had come here. He said with a smile, "She was in the corner. Didn't you see her?" Li Jinfeng couldn't help but turn around and look at the dining room from afar. He wondered, "Why didn't I see her? That's strange. I looked around the dining room at that time." Then, as if he suddenly realized something, he said, "There are only 3 tables in the dining room. Where did the corner come from? There was no sign of a woman at all." "Xiaohua, you're lying to me," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. "It looks like Brother Li isn't muddle-headed. Haha, big sister Qiu Tong seemed to be eating with the manor lord and the others. They weren't together at the same time, and they might not be in this dining room. I really don't know the specifics. Anyway, I've never seen big sister Qiu Tong when I was eating here." Seeing Li Jinfeng's disappointed look, Zhang Xiaohua said, "However, I think I met big sister Qiu Tong once when I was returning to the house after eating." Hearing this, Li Jinfeng's eyes immediately lit up. He really took one step at a time and kept looking back, hoping to see the figure he was looking forward to. It was a pity that he didn't see her even when he moved to the small courtyard. Sitting on the chair in the room, he really wanted Zhang Xiaohua to help him look for Qiu Tong. However, he also knew that Zhang Xiaohua was just a servant in the manor. He couldn't go wherever he wanted to go and look for Qiu Tong. Moreover, from Zhang Xiaohua's words, he hadn't seen Qiu Tong for a long time. Thus, he didn't think much of it. However, his eyes still glanced outside the room from time to time, hoping that something would happen. Unfortunately, things didn't go as he wished. The rain didn't stop for the entire afternoon. A few people passed by the door, but there was no sign of the woman. Seeing that it was getting late, Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng reluctantly prepared to leave. Zhang Xiaohu naturally couldn't bear to part with his younger brother. He held his hand and reminded him of this and that. But Li Jinfeng couldn't bear to part with who? The security of Huanxi Manor was very strict. When Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng came in, they had taken a waist token and were escorted in by a guard. Naturally, they had to be escorted out. When the three of them walked out of the small house, the rain outside was already pattering. It seemed that it was going to stop. Out of courtesy, Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng went to He Tianxu's room to say goodbye before leaving the small courtyard. Zhang Xiaohu also asked He Tianxu to take care of his younger brother in the future. He Tianxu naturally agreed, and said some humble words before the three of them left the small courtyard. There was some distance from the small courtyard to the side door. The road was paved with bluestones, so it wasn't muddy. The three of them chatted as they walked. Li Jinfeng saw the fields by the side of the road and couldn't help but ask, Xiaohua, what's planted in these fields? Some of them are crops. I recognize them. What about those? They look like grass. Are they vegetables? Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, and felt that it was better not to say. She stopped him from asking and said, Brotherly, there are rules in the manor. There are many things that can't be told to outsiders. You don't have to ask too much. However, then she changed her mind and said, If you have any books on growing herbs, you can help me collect some. I'm still willing to read more. When Li Jinfeng heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up and he smiled. Along the way, the sky was dark and the rain was no longer dripping. The sound of frogs and insects could be heard in the gully next to them. It seemed that the rain had stopped, and they came out to get some fresh air. This scene reminded the two brothers of the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohu said first, Xiaohua, you've been out for a long time. Do you miss home? Zhang Xiaohua said sadly, Of course I miss it very much. But I haven't made any achievements yet. If my family knew about it, it would be a waste of effort. Zhang Xiaohu also sighed and said, Yes, I think so too. However, we should at least let them know that we are safe. Otherwise, father and mother will be worried at home. Li Jinfeng frowned and said, Brother Zhang, you can ask someone you know to pass a message to your family. Won't that do? Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly and said, The two of us came here alone. We don't have any relatives or friends in Pingyang City. Where would we find someone we know to pass a message to? Li Jinfeng smiled and said, Brother Zhang, you seem to have forgotten that I'm from Pingyang City. Zhang Xiaohu said, I know that young Master Li is from Lu Town. But haven't you been studying in the academy all this while? I remember that young master is also alone. How would you have the time to pass a message to us? Li Jinfeng nodded and said, You're right. However, the academy usually has holidays during the winter and summer. Although the time is not long, it is enough for me to go home. This summer, I'm studying in the academy and also helping Zhang Xiaohua with her enlightenment. Therefore, I didn't return to Lu Town. After some time, I can help you pass a message back. Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu said in unison, Really, young Master Li? Thank you so much. Li Jinfeng waved his hand and said, You don't have to be so polite. We are all strangers in a foreign land. We should help each other. This is just a small matter. Why do you have to be so polite? As they spoke, they arrived at the side door. The guard at the door verified the waist token and asked Zhang Xiaohua to sign a booklet. Only then did he let Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng out. The three of them stood outside the door. Zhang Xiaohu looked at his younger brother. Zhang Xiaohua also tugged on her second brother's clothes like when they were young, unwilling to let go. Although the two of them were not too far away, it was inevitable that they would be reluctant to part with each other after not seeing each other for a month. On the other hand, Li Jinfeng was more open-minded and said, The two of us brothers live in the same Pingyang City. If Xiaohu is busy practicing martial arts and doesn't have time to come, I will ask you to come over when I have the time. We can come more often in the future. Zhang Xiaohua thought about it and agreed. She let go of her hand and said, Brotherly, if my second brother doesn't have time, it's good that you can come too. When I see Sister Chiao Tong one day, I will tell her that you want to see her. Is that all right? When Li Jinfeng heard this, he smiled and said, I like what you said. Don't blame me for coming to see you. However, You don't have to be too deliberate and say that I want to see her. Just mention it a little, and that will do. Zhang Xiaohua did not understand and asked, why is that? Li Jinfeng said, you don't understand. You are still a child. You will know in the future. Just do as I say. Zhang Xiaohua nodded her head in agreement. Then Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng left Huanxi Mountain Village, looking back 3 times with every step. Zhang Xiaohua only turned and entered the village when the two of them could no longer be seen. The next morning, it was a sunny day and the sky was blue. Early in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua ran to the big tree where she often practiced martial arts. She thought about what Zhang Xiaohu had taught her yesterday. Using both her hands and feet, she slowly practiced the 6 he fists according to her memory. As Zhang Xiaohua expected, she had practiced the dozens of moves of the 6 he fists very thoroughly. There were only 7 moves left. Zhang Xiaohua repeatedly practiced these 7 moves to ensure that she did not forget them. She then stopped and stood there in a horse stance. In her mind, she began to familiarize herself with the combination of moves. However, this combination was like building blocks. The closer she got to the end, the easier it became. There were 100 incomplete moves in the fist technique, which meant that there were 7 broken parts. She tried each part with the 7 moves one by one. As expected, the success rate was quite high. She only needed to try the first part 4 times before she found the incomplete move. Zhang Xiaohua perfectly integrated it into the fist technique. The next few parts were even simpler. Soon there was only 1 move and the last broken part left. Zhang Xiaohua was happy but also nervous. She put them together in her mind with some trepidation. This time, the heavens took pity on her and did not disappoint Zhang Xiaohua. That move was perfectly integrated into the fist technique. In an instant, the fist technique that had been completed in Zhang Xiaohua's mind was like a waterfall hanging over a river. A little person in Zhang Xiaohua's mind smoothly practiced this nameless fist technique from beginning to end. After the little person practiced a few times, Zhang Xiaohua also could not restrain her hands and feet. Following her thoughts, she also practiced in the open space in the forest. This fist technique had a total of 108 moves. Although it was the first time that Zhang Xiaohua had performed it completely, she did not know how many times she had practiced these moves in her mind. Other than the last 7 moves, the other moves were also practiced countless times by Zhang Xiaohua in this open space. Now that Zhang Xiaohua had finally gathered all of them, she practiced from beginning to end in one go. It was as smooth as moving clouds and flowing water. After Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing once, she was still not satisfied. She practiced 3 more times in a row before she finally stopped. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua not only felt relaxed and comfortable physically, but also incomparably happy mentally. It was as if she had let go of the golden chains and was incomparably free. The burden in her heart was finally thrown off. She could finally practice a complete set of fist technique like others. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with light. During the day, when she was working in the fields, Zhang Xiaohua did not stop thinking about the 108 moves of the fist technique. She remembered that her second brother had once said that the fist technique had both offensive and defensive moves. Only then would it be perfect. What about the moves that she had forgotten from the 110 sets of fist technique? When Zhang Xiaohua finished thinking about them one by one, she realized that only 36 of the 108 moves were defensive moves. The other 72 moves were all offensive moves. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be secretly surprised. These 72 were the number of earth fiends. Fiends were the fierce gods of heaven and earth. They were fierce and ferocious, which was the essence of offense. Heaven and earth had Tao, and the earth had Tao. Earth had Tao, and the heavens had Tao to repair it. 36 were the number of heavenly spirits. Spirit was the strength of heaven and earth, which was the essence of defense. Zhang Xiaohua thought of some words in the books that she had read. She was very doubtful and amazed. She did not know if what she had thought was correct. At night, in the forest, the night sky was as dark as ink. Stars dotted the sky, but there was no moon. Zhang Xiaohua practiced her fists alone in the open space. After a set of fist technique, her body felt incomparably refreshed. She then practiced the 16 changes of the sword technique. Only then did she sit on the ground. Yesterday's heavy rain had made the ground somewhat muddy. Today's sun did not completely dry the rainwater. Zhang Xiaohua pulled a blade of grass and held it in her mouth. She leaned against a tree and thought of a problem. Every fist technique has a name. For example, Arhut fists, Nanji fists, and Erlang fists. What should I name this fist technique? Xiaohua fists. No, that's too stingy. Piecing together fists? That sounds terrible. Sigh, it's really difficult. Zhang Xiaohua was a little disappointed. She then put her hands behind her head and hugged her head. She lay down on the damp grass. She looked up at the clear night sky. In the distance, countless stars twinkled. It seemed that Zhang Xiaohua had not seen the stars like this for a long time. The last time she saw the stars was when she was young. It was when her grandmother was still alive. She was chatting with her grandmother in the small courtyard of the Guozhuang house. Thinking of her grandmother, Zhang Xiaohua felt even more depressed. Was her grandmother fine in the sky? Which star was her grandmother's home? Please collect it. Thank you. Chapter 115. Looking at the twinkling stars in the sky, Zhang Xiaohua had endless thoughts. Suddenly, he felt that this twinkling was really familiar, but when he thought carefully, he still couldn't remember. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Recently, it was really strange. Occasionally, there would be some things that made him feel familiar, but when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't make sense of it. What did those stars in the distant sky have to do with him? How could they make him feel this way? Looking, suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua saw the bright Big Dipper in the sky like a spoon. He remembered what the book said. In February the elm falls, the chief arrives at the dawn. In August, the wheat grows, the heavenly spirit occupies the unitary. Also think of the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, using the chief to cover the head, using the heavenly spirit to point forward. The moon of yin and yang, the first 3 stars are the heavenly spirit. The heavenly spirit is the river chief, the yin construction moon is the opposite. Heavenly spirit, isn't it the handle of the Big Dipper? And in the constellation of the Big Dipper, there are 36 heavenly spirit stars. Don't they coincide with his 36 defensive moves? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be happy. The name of the fist technique was Big Dipper Fist. As for the 72 offensive moves that coincided with the Earth Fiend, he threw it to the back of his mind and didn't think about it. That was because this Big Dipper Fist's name was so resounding. Hearing it, one would know that it was high-quality goods. As for where the moves included in it came from, who knew? If Zhang Xiaohua didn't say it, no matter how hard others racked their brains, they wouldn't be able to think that these moves were all pieced together from other fist techniques. Thinking that these moves had been forgotten by Zhang Xiaohua would be full of mistakes. After thinking of the name of the fist technique, Zhang Xiaohua jumped up from the ground. He picked up his fighting spirit again, and continued to practice his Big Dipper Fist technique. After practicing for an unknown number of times, Zhang Xiaohua was a little tired. Just as she was about to practice for the last time, an unexpected situation suddenly occurred. When Zhang Xiaohua stood still with the pole, and made the gesture to start the first move, he suddenly felt a very weak and slightly cold thing coming from his toes and flowing up his feet to his legs. Zhang Xiaohua was so scared that he quickly stopped. When he carefully felt it, the cold feeling immediately disappeared. Zhang Xiaohua was very strange. Was it his illusion? Thus, he changed to a dry place and started practicing again. Sure enough, as soon as he started practicing, that chilly feeling would come out, from his toes to the soles of his feet, and then flow up his legs. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment, and withdrew his stance. This inexplicable situation made him afraid. What if his cultivation went berserk? What would he do? Alas, it was really difficult to be self-taught. Zhang Xiaohua didn't even think about it. He didn't practice the mental cultivation method of internal strength at all. How could he be possessed by the devil? Maybe it was because he heard many people talking about it that he remembered this word. But Zhang Xiaohua thought for a long time, and still couldn't figure it out. This fist technique was finally completed, but he couldn't practice it. What a headache. And didn't he practice for a long time just now? Why didn't he have this problem? Why not change to swordsmanship? Thinking of swordsmanship, Zhang Xiaohua thought of the warm current from the sword in his left hand. His heart lit up. Could it be that this chilly feeling was something similar to that warm current? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua understood a little. His fear gradually disappeared and he made up his mind. He wanted to see what this feeling was all about and how it could torment him. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua's expression turned cold. He got into a stance and started from the first stance. In Zhang Xiaohua's mind, the chilly feeling changed with each stance. It changed with each stance. It appeared from the toes of his left foot, went up his calf, flowed through the left half of his body, and reached his head. It happened to be the 54th stance. Then it flowed through the right half of his body. With the last 108 stances, it disappeared into the toes of his right foot. After finishing the fist technique, Zhang Xiaohua carefully felt his body. There didn't seem to be any discomfort, as if there was no cold current passing through his body. When he thought about how the cold current flowed through his body, there didn't seem to be any special feeling. It was very smooth. It was just that when it flowed through his right hand, it was a little sluggish. Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled, but he couldn't ask anyone else. He couldn't just go to He Tianshu and ask, "Captain He, when I practice, do my toes feel cold?" Perhaps He Tianshu would first ask Zhang Xiaohua, "Your shoes and socks don't leak air, right?" Perhaps this was internal energy? Zhang Xiaohua had a flash of thought. If it was internal energy, then that would be awesome. His fist technique could actually cultivate internal energy. And the name of the Big Dipper fist didn't seem to suit such an awesome fist technique. Then what should he change it to? Zhang Xiaohua was very conflicted. Suddenly his eyes lit up. Alright, he'll call it the Big Dipper fist. What a resounding name. He really admired his own idea. As for whether that chilly feeling was internal energy, he would wait until he saw his second brother next time to ask him in detail about how he cultivated internal energy. Zhang Xiaohua made up his mind and prepared to go back. After all, it was already late at night, and he still had work to do tomorrow. However, the chilly feeling urged Zhang Xiaohua to get into a stance again. He prepared to experience it one last time. But when Zhang Xiaohua started practicing, he was stunned. That cold current actually didn't appear. When Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing the 108 moves, it still didn't appear. Zhang Xiaohua was completely dizzy. He was speechless. He took the lantern and went back. Fortunately, he didn't think of telling He Tianshu. How could he explain this feeling to him? Walking on the road, Zhang Xiaohua kept thinking about this problem. Why did this feeling sometimes appear, and sometimes not? Until late at night, when Zhang Xiaohua was sound asleep, there was still no result. Early in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua came to the open space in the forest early. First, he practiced the sword in his left hand for a while. Now, the warm current in his left arm would appear from time to time. Although he didn't use a branch to stab a tree, Zhang Xiaohua felt that this warm current was beneficial to him. Then, he practiced the sword in his right hand for a while. Zhang Xiaohua felt that after many days of practice, his right hand's fingers seemed to be a little more flexible. It was just a feeling, but he didn't know whether it was true or not. When he finished practicing the sword moves, Zhang Xiaohua began to practice his set of Big Dipper magical fist. After practicing a few times, that cold current didn't appear. Zhang Xiaohua was very disappointed. He clearly knew that it wasn't his illusion, but it didn't appear again. There was really no good way. Seeing that it was still early, the green-clothed little hats probably hadn't woken up yet. He Tianshu and the others had just gotten up to practice, so Zhang Xiaohua began to practice again. There was no other way. Other than that sword move, he only knew this set of fist moves. If he practiced the sword move for a long time, his fingers would hurt, so he could only practice this. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was immersed in the pleasure of practicing, suddenly, that feeling appeared again. However, this time it wasn't a cold feeling but a bit of warmth. Zhang Xiaohua was immediately overjoyed. He carefully comprehended every move, afraid that he would miss something. However, everything was still yesterday's reenactment. There was nothing strange about it. When Zhang Xiaohua finished performing it and performed it again, the feeling was gone again. Suddenly Zhang Xiaohua understood. Whether it was the appearance of the warm current or the cold current, it was related to the number of times he practiced. When he practiced to a certain number, that feeling would appear once. Then he would have to count it again. When it accumulated to a certain number, it would appear again. Zhang Xiaohua thought about it carefully and understood. This morning he had done it 10 times. It was on the 9th time that he felt the warm current. With this discovery, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to know that his set of Big Dipper magical fist was practiced 9 times each time. When the warm current flowed throughout the body, it would achieve the best effect. Zhang Xiaohua practiced every day in the morning and in the evening. The 108 moves took a lot of time. To be able to practice 9 times was already a big waste of time. No matter how hard he practiced, he couldn't practice the second 9 times. Then practicing beyond 9 times might not be effective. Of course, these were all Zhang Xiaohua's guesses. In the next few days, Zhang Xiaohua hid in the forest to practice his Big Dipper magical fist. In order to practice better, Zhang Xiaohua would also come to the forest during his afternoon break. Moreover, after several attempts, Zhang Xiaohua found that when he practiced the Big Dipper magical fist in the morning, his toes would feel neither cold nor hot. At noon, it would feel hot, and at night it would feel chilly. It was different 3 times a day. Zhang Xiaohua found it very strange. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohua was still a little nervous. After all, it was something that fell from the sky. Who knew if it was good or bad? But after a few days of practice, his whole body didn't feel any discomfort. This meant that there was no harm. Zhang Xiaohua naturally felt relieved. Ever since Elder Yu finished teaching Zhang Xiaohua the sword moves, he would occasionally come to check on his practice in the first few days. However, he didn't come near and only watched from afar. He approved of Zhang Xiaohua's diligence and didn't come over anymore. Recently, Elder Yu found out that Zhang Xiaohua didn't even rest in the afternoon. His heart couldn't help but ache. In fact, Elder Yu's feelings toward Zhang Xiaohua were very ordinary at first. He only felt that this child was down-to-earth, hard-working, and had an unusual dedication towards martial arts. It was just that his aptitude was extremely poor, so he didn't have any other thoughts. Later on, when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua's right hand was crippled and his bones were shattered by internal energy, he continued to practice his fist techniques as usual. Even though he didn't have a master to guide him, his fist was still full of energy. Thus, when he thought about his own left arm, he sympathized with him and taught him an unknown sword move that he had learned. Even though Zhang Xiaohua didn't learn it completely due to his aptitude, Elder Yu still liked this stubborn, stupid child. When he saw that Zhang Xiaohua was also practicing martial arts in the afternoon, he naturally knew that he wanted to improve his sword or fist techniques. However, Elder Yu understood the principle of not overdoing it. Elder Yu was worried that Zhang Xiaohua would hurt his body if he overdid it. Thus, one afternoon, when Zhang Xiaohua was practicing his sword, he quietly appeared. When Elder Yu appeared, Zhang Xiaohua was coincidentally practicing his sword with his right hand. When he saw Elder Yu's sneaky figure, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned for a moment before she smiled. She didn't stop her sword technique, but picked up a tree branch and stabbed it at Elder Yu. When Elder Yu saw the tree branch coming over, he was also stunned for a moment before he shifted his body and dodged it. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't stop her attack. She took a step forward and changed into another form as she continued to stab. This sword technique was taught by Elder Yu, so he was naturally familiar with the changes within the technique. When he saw that Elder Yu was practicing with Zhang Xiaohua, he was delighted. He didn't retaliate and changed his body to match with Zhang Xiaohua's sword technique. By the time Zhang Xiaohua finished her 16 changes, not a single leaf or branch had touched her body. When Zhang Xiaohua stopped her sword technique and kept the tree branch, Elder Yu finally stopped and said with a smile, "Zhang Xiaohua, you've learned well. You're very sharp with these changes. If I wasn't familiar with the sword technique's changes, I would have been stabbed by your tree branch." Then he said, "During this period of time, your right hand's fingers have become much more nimble. You're also very familiar with the sword technique's changes. However, your strength is still far from enough. It's probably because your fingers aren't strong enough yet. Zhang Xiaohua nodded with a smile. That's right, elder you. During this period of time, my fingers have become much more nimble after practicing the sword technique's changes. In the past, my fingers would ache after practicing once or twice, but now they're much better. Elder Yu continued. Then you don't have to be proud. Have you not mastered the last 3 changes yet? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's face turned bitter. Elder Yu was right. No matter how hard Zhang Xiaohua practiced, she couldn't master the last 3 changes. It was either she couldn't keep up with the pace, or she couldn't use the tree branch to stab it out. In short, her entire body was uncoordinated. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua like this, Elder Yu said, even if you can't master it, you don't have to practice day and night. Didn't I tell you to stop before it's too late? Sometimes rest is the best way to cultivate. Zhang Xiaohua was extremely touched. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Elder Yu then asked kindly, how's your recitation of the sword technique? Zhang Xiaohua followed his instructions and recited the sword technique word by word. Elder Yu was even more gratified when he heard her reciting it word by word. He patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and said, very good. You're actually able to recite it word by word. You must have put in a lot of effort. Alright, let's stop here for today. Rest well and don't tire yourself out. Come, let's go back together. Actually, Zhang Xiaohua really wanted to say, Elder Yu, please let me off. I still haven't finished practicing the Big Dipper mystical fist. Can you let me practice for a while more? But when she saw the elder's concerned expression, Zhang Xiaohua still lowered her head and obediently followed him back. In the following period of time, Zhang Xiaohua had already gotten used to this kind of lifestyle. She practiced martial arts 3 times in the morning, noon and night, and worked in the medicinal field on a daily basis. Those tasks were simply too easy for a country bumpkin like Zhang Xiaohua. She only needed to be a little more careful, and she could do it perfectly. As for the medicinal plants that He Tianshu and the others were worried about, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the slightest opinion about it. He only knew that the seeds would sprout once they were planted. How would he know why they wouldn't sprout? At this time, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood the feeling of her second brother, Zhang Xiaohu, concentrating on practicing a set of martial arts. Those familiar moves were like flowing clouds and flowing water, like a dancing poem. Only with the whistling of his fists and kicks could Zhang Xiaohua feel a kind of true feeling. He liked this kind of feeling of movement. Late at night, under the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua would often read some miscellaneous notes and ancient books. From between the lines, he read about the life he had never experienced, and the places he had never been to. It was as if there was another world in those books that was slowly opening up to him. He gradually fell in love with this kind of life. Although Zhang Xiaohua had always believed that the Big Dipper magical fist that he practiced could produce internal energy, he didn't know what internal energy was. He had always wanted to ask He Tianshu, but seeing He Tianshu frowning every day, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to disturb him. If he asked He Tianshu, he wouldn't want to. If he practiced internal energy, then so be it, but if he didn't, then wouldn't he be laughed to death by them? After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua still decided to make a trip to the Lotus Flower Escort Agency to listen to Zhang Xiaohu's opinion. He first asked for leave from He Tianshu. Then Zhang Xiaohua received his waist token from the guard at the side door. Only then did he calmly walk out of Huanxi Manor. Walking on the road, the first thing that came to his mind was that when the cart reaches the mountain, there must be a road. Where there is a road, there must be a swift carriage. Although Zhang Xiaohua really wanted to sit in a carriage, when he thought about the money in his arms and his parents in the countryside, he restrained his desire. In fact, with Zhang Xiaohua's current condition, even if he ran to the escort agency, it wouldn't be a problem. Sitting in a carriage was just a child's dream. After Zhang Xiaohua overcame this thought, he walked and ran, and soon arrived at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Today the escort agency didn't seem to be busy. Sparrows could be seen in front of the door. The guard recognized Zhang Xiaohua. Looking at him, who looked more and more like Zhang Xiaohu, he greeted him and let him in. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at second brother's room, he found that Zhang Xiaohu wasn't in the room. Fortunately, the room wasn't locked. Guessing that he was at the escort agency, he pushed the door open and entered. The room was very clean. Zhang Xiaohu probably cleaned it every day. Thinking about how messy her room was, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but blush. The room was still the same as before. There weren't many changes. However, there was a stack of books on the table. Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. When did second brother become literate? When he walked forward, he discovered that the books were actually about the cultivation of medicinal herbs. There were also a few thick history books. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. Li Jinfeng really took what he said to her last time seriously. He actually found some books on this topic. He probably didn't have time to look for him, so he left them with second brother for now. With nothing to do, Zhang Xiaohua casually pulled out a book from the pile and read it with great interest. There was a lot of information written in the book. Most of it explained how certain herbalists cultivated and managed their plants. It was very related to what he did on a daily basis. Thus, when he compared his own experience with what he did on a daily basis, Zhang Xiaohua actually found quite a few mistakes that he usually overlooked. Thus, he began to read even more seriously. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was engrossed in reading, Zhang Xiaohu pushed the door open and entered. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua in the room, he was very happy and called out, "Xiaohua, when did you get here?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at the sky and said, "I've been here for a while. You weren't in the room, so I was reading by myself." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "Oh, those books were brought by young Master Li. He said that he would bring them over the next time we visit you. Since you're here this time, we'll save ourselves the trouble. You can take them with you when you leave. Please collect them. Thank you." That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.